Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of the HiddenREF Festival. Here at the wonderful think tank, Birmingham's Science Museum. Please do come back here. I'm sure it's inspired you to do so. For some of you, of course, it's also welcome back because you were here with us yesterday. For others, it's lovely to have you here on day 2. We're going to go through some of the intros again, because I think it's important to remind ourselves why we're here. So, I'm James, and with my colleagues Lindsay, Simon, Gemma's online, Ola, Ben who's up in the booth today, we're going to give a big hand to Ben later in the day, Emma who is here today, I can't see because the lights are slightly blinding me, waving over there you go, Jude, Simon K, Tony, who's also here today, but again, Tony's waving over there you go. Georgina, and who's not here today, and Veronica, who's somewhere around as well. Thank you all again for making the effort to come to Birmingham, or to dial in online, because we are streaming today on Zoom, to join us in our efforts to change research culture. As I said yesterday, I know many of you have been following our work for some time and have a sense of what we do. But before we start today, just as we did yesterday, I want to take some time to remind ourselves why we're here. So, this statement still is the key statement for us. This is why the HiddenREF team are here, and this is why we hope you are here with us. And we fundamentally believe if we don't recognise the people who are vital to research, we limit our ability to conduct research. Now, one of the things I've been reflecting on recently, that this is one of those statements that might come across in some contexts as a bit of a platitude. It's easy to say we want better for people. But what I've increasingly found interesting as we've been working on this project about this statement is how it intersects with ideas about what is vital to research. Because often research means different things when you ask someone who's established or someone who's new. When you ask someone who's on a more traditional research pathway, or someone who's entering from the outside, when you ask a policy researcher or a chemist, when you ask a research technician or a philosopher, when you ask a team scientist who works in contexts where team science is a kind of a normal thing, and then when you might ask a lone researcher in contexts where lone research is more a thing, and so on. The HiddenREF is about research, all research, and ensuring all who contribute to it has a voice. And this has attracted a range of supporters. And these supporters are really important to us because they come from a variety of domains, they represent different professional groups, they're organisations that do excellent and important policy work around research, they're publishers of research outputs, and they're national infrastructures. And with their support, and the kind of leverage they've enabled us to have into their various communities, and the generosity of those communities to kind of give things back to us. The HiddenREF has, for the last 5 years, sought to change research culture across a range of activities. So this is the second HiddenREF festival. We've had 2 HiddenREF competitions, and later today we'll announce some of the details of the third competition coming next year. We launched a manifesto. We started a podcast. And through the Embedding Trust and Evaluation project, which is funding this work, we are one of the groups working with Research England and the REF and the Research Advisory Panel, Research Diversity Advisory Panel, to kind of help the community understand how to recognise and assess all outputs and everyone involved in the conduct of research. So I come back to this graph. This graph is in every talk we give about the HiddenREF. We saw it yesterday for those who are here, but those joining us today, you may have seen this before, you may not. It's the last 3 research evaluation exercises in the UK, split across various different forms of research output that were submitted to the exercise for evaluation. And what we find, quite obviously, is that publications are overwhelming in their number. but not just overwhelming in their number as a percentage of everything submitted, but they're also growing. If it carries on that trajectory, it will reach everything eventually, if nothing is done. And those are those monographs, journal articles, conference proceedings, chapters in books, scholarly editions, which we tend to think of across all research as those more traditional outputs. We can put this another way. So in 2021, if publications were the tallest building in the world, exhibitions then were a typical UK house, and software, Simon's particular bugbear, would be a matchbox. Now, not every research domain develops research that might naturally culminate in original, significant, and rigorous exhibitions or pieces of software or artifacts, or even, per the most recent guidance from the REF, reagents. We loved that when we saw reagents pop up as a possible non-traditional output. But many do. And these comparisons really suggest something deeply distorting is going on, both in what is being submitted, often articles about a thing the research actually is, the exhibit, the software, the artifact, the reagent, and about whose labour in the research process is being recognised in that CKU part of the REF. So what we did was create a competition for all those types of entries that REF allows that aren't publications. Some of you may have submitted this competition. Some of you in this room won a prize in this competition. For those non-traditional, not traditionally submitted, NTO, DOT, whatever you want to call it, output types. And what we did when we did the first competition and the second was ask the community, what is not there? What are the things that REF has been saying thus far are things you can also submit that basically come under that other category? No one likes other categories, right? So it's about teasing apart that open other category and saying, what could go in there? What do you do that you see as a research output? And so people told us training materials, citizen science, research infrastructure, community building, GrimPack, standards, research teams, public engagement, campaigns, and then everything else rather than other. That sounds a bit more fun. But they also told us about people. They really wanted to submit people to the competition. And across 2 competitions, they submitted a huge number of people who they said were vital to the research they did. Data stewards and managers, librarians, technicians, lived experience contributors, research software engineers, PRISMs, professional service personnel, public engagement professionals, research managers, administrators, and clinical trials managers. A huge range of possible people that make research possible, or without whom it wouldn't happen. Later, you're going to hear from 3 of our HiddenREF competition winners, Lorraine, Holly, and Laura. Their stories like that of Emily Senna, who links her promotion to the fact that she won an award through one of the HiddenREF competitions. And what people like Emily have been able to do with that recognition more broadly really drives our work forward. They and the volume of entries that first competition inspired the first festival. And I flagged it yesterday, but the insights in that first festival were published with Emerald Publishing, and we managed to get this out as a white paper. And that really does condense the kind of conversations that we had at the last festival, the sorts of things people were talking about, many of which actually resonated through our conversations yesterday through our workshops. But we hope we can build on that work with the next set of publications we put out about these community events. We launched the 5% Manifesto, which is a commitment to try and get back to RE 2008 NTO levels. A challenge really for institutions to try to decenter publications from how they recognize excellent research, to decenter the proxies of excellence, and instead to incentivize researchers to honor their research for what it is, to create outputs that best fit their research process rather than feed into the kind of the publications beast. And then we were funded for 5 years from Research England to improve the understanding of the REF and its distorting effects, to build an evidence base to support the reliable evaluation of NTOs, and to change research culture in the context of, but not just in relation to, the REF. To embed the principle of recognising all contributors to research and everyone involved in its conduct across UKHE, which is a small goal, I know, but it also includes here trying to extend that internationally, trying to create toolkits that people elsewhere can use to inspire change in other research evaluation frameworks. So we have things coming up and things going on through that project. This evidence review is coming around how people in various different contexts have tried to evaluate and recognise different forms of diverse output. Our podcast is trying to do work to demystify the REF. And our NTO workshops are beginning to ramp up. And I think it's important to say, actually, that the NTO workshops are not something we initially had planned to do, to kind of go into communities and run workshops where communities would, learn about how they might think about assessing NTOs, and then they could help support the wider development of those toolkits. It started in response to the demand for training on evaluating NTOs. Essentially, we started getting emails from people saying, can you run a workshop on this? Because they kind of assumed we'd become some kind of infrastructure that does it. At the time at which we were effectively campaign, we were about, people need this, so let's make that part of what we do over the next 5 years. Now, all of this is only possible because of all those people who are on the HiddenREF committee and the time that they give in various different forms to support that work. And together, for this festival, we've assembled you here to try and achieve 5 things across 2 days, 3 of which are probably the focus of today. To centre the hidden roles in research, to develop communities of practice, and to define what success looks like for the HiddenREF. But we also want you to have fun. We also want you to get angry, to ponder, to spread rumours, to do whatever it is that discussing research culture brings out in you, apart from, of course, being mean and rude. And we have the code of conduct, which you can access via the back of your badge, where you can find out more about what to do if someone is mean or rude. Now, the aims today are sprinkled across a really tight schedule. He looks at his watch. I think I'm doing all right. It starts with a packed session of lightning talks. And we had a huge response to our lightning talks call. We didn't know what people wanted to say about NTOs, hidden roles, research culture, but we just assumed, I guess, that people would want to say some stuff and made a slot for it. And then we had so many responses, we had to extend the slot. So a packed session of lightning talks to start the day. We then have a brisk workshop, which Simon's going to lead on upstairs. And then we'll move into some sessions where we'll celebrate our winners of HiddenREF competition. And we'll have another nice photo. And a wonderful panel at the end on research excellence and careers. After which we will move on to next steps, including that sneak peek at the next HiddenREF competition. So before we start in earnest, then some housekeeping. So today we are primarily in this room for those who are here. Obviously that means nothing to those online. We're primarily in this room. The only reason it matters for those online is that workshop session will be happening in another room where we're not live streaming. So there'll be a break of about an hour for you where we're doing stuff in another room and you can take a break from your live stream. We'll also have lunch in that event suite as well. Most of you already use the cloakroom reception, but if you do need to drop anything off, you can put it there. If you can't find the toilets, ask one of us, but it's relatively well signposted. If you need a quiet space, the building does provide them, particularly in the Molino restaurant, and you do have museum access for the day if you want to take a break and go and check out the wonderful museum here at the think tank. A reminder to those from yesterday, but also new information for those arriving today about lanyards. Those in yellow lanyards have asked not to be photographed. So if you're taking pictures yourselves, try to avoid that. Our photographer may take pictures of people who have yellow lanyards, but we'll remove those later. And anyone wearing a red lanyard is either running the show or one of our volunteers, so should be able to help you if you have a problem of any kind. And that includes with the code of conduct. Please report any problems to someone with a red lanyard. There is no fire drill planned. At least there definitely wasn't a fire drill planned yesterday. I think we've been told there's not one today. So anyway, there shouldn't be a fire drill planned. So if there is a fire alarm, do leave via the nearest exit. And I'll do my airplane host person here, which is to say that for many of you, you won't notice that there's a fire exit right in front of me. Your nearest exit, in this case, is not behind you, but it's hidden from your view. The meeting point's in the courtyard at the front of the building. And Research Professional News are here again today as our media partner. And don't be surprised if they ask you for a comment on something that we've talked about today. And finally, since I mentioned Research Professional News, a huge thank you to our festival partners who enable us to do this in this wonderful venue. In addition to funding from Research England, the festival is possible thanks to the Society of Research Software Engineers, Coherent Digital, Emerald Publishing, as well as our media partner, Research Professional News. Which brings us to the fun stuff, to the lightning talks, which I'll hand over to Lindsay.
Purposely gave myself the fun stuff. Sorry about that, James. Morning, everyone. So I am Lindsay Ballantyne, and I'm delighted to be chairing the lightning talks today. Before we get on to them, though, I would like to work out how to use this, first of all. What do we do, James? Click down? No. Oh, sorry. Bring your attention to the Slido link that is on the slide here. So for all of the sessions today, we are going to be using Slido for the Q&A. So if you either join it through the QR code behind me, or you can head to slido.com and type in HiddenREF 2025 into the little box that it will give you. I'll give you a little minute to do that. So unfortunately, during the lightning talks, we don't have time to ask the questions, but I'd still like to encourage you to ask questions which we can then pass on to the speakers afterwards. I think a really great idea is for maybe us to share them on Slack, and we can start some conversations over there. So do me a favour when you do send in a question, especially during the lightning talks, put the speaker's name at the start. That will help me when I sort them, and I'll be very much appreciative of that. You guys had enough time to have a look at the Slido link? Perfect. So, on to the lightning talks. We will be hearing from 15 of our wonderful attendees today. They each have 4 minutes, and to save us a bit of time, I'm not going to introduce them. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, because I think they can manage that. The first person, though, unfortunately was unable to be here this morning, so they were kind enough to pre-record their talk, and I will attempt to make a start on that.
Swimming upstream, Radka Newton, Lancaster University Management School, making subtle count in research-intensive institutions. Welcome everyone to my talk, and let me just tease you with a little poem. Swimming upstream. You are on a teaching contract, he said. You don't do research, she said. You are not refable, he said. Not good enough, I felt. I do subtle, I said. That's not research, she said. Well, where are all scholars, he said. So what is it you actually do, she said. Not good enough, I felt. I collect data about teaching practice. I collect data about student learning. Students collect data with me. I analyze data. Students analyze data with me. I collaborate with others. I collaborate with librarians, learning developers, our career advisors. Sounds like research, he said. We compare data. We draw conclusions. We improve our own practice. We improve students' experience. We improve how our discipline is taught. We share our findings. Sounds like research, he said. Not good enough, I felt. Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, or SOTL, has quite recently made its way to our academic community from the US, where it was coined in late 1990s. It was introduced as an equal, complementary counterpart to the traditional discipline research. Our academic disciplines are not just advanced through insights and theorizing about disciplines themselves, they also live on through the way they are shared, taught and understood by the learners, and later interpreted and applied, and also further evolved. Such systematic and rigorous inquiry that is contextually situated typically involves action research, ethnography, observation, reflective practice, as well as statistical data, and it is anchored in students as partners concept and provides many inclusive opportunities for the whole community in academia to get involved. The outputs range from very traditional presented 4-star journals to autoethnographic accounts, short films, exhibits, portfolios, visuals and verbal, to stories, policies, guides, lesson plans, or weird yellow fish PowerPoint slides. With SOTL, through SOTL, we aim to improve our discipline communication channels. We aim to improve ourselves as the discipline conveners, and we include our learners in knowledge co-creation. Ref fantasy or reftastic? I ask. Bloody reftastic, if I may say. SOTL community is growing in the UK with some committed and dedicated colleagues across various disciplines. I am here representing my best pals, Business Education, Scholarship and Teaching Network, created last year by colleagues from research-intensive business schools in Warwick, King's, Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham, Glasgow, and my home institution, Lancaster University Management School. Connect with us and join our murky waters. Thank you.
And the slides. Oops. Oh, sorry. All right. Use that one.
I'll just click on
Other way.
Hello everyone, I'm Marianna Ciula, Director and Principal Analyst at King's Digital Lab, King's College London. And I am giving a talk, very brief, about this checklist for digital outputs that we developed in the lab. Digital outputs on the web, inspired by research software engineering ethos and practices. You'll find it on Zenodo, but hopefully the slides will be made available. So the kind of trigger for us to create this checklist back in 2019 was that digital humanities research is increasingly computational as many other type of research, so relies on software, data sets, publications such as digital editions, and so on. The other premise is that the REF has recognized digital outputs as research outputs for a long time now, so King's submitted digital outputs in the past, in the previous cycles as well. So there was this need of, okay, how do we assess this stuff? Can the lab help us? So we were kind of commissioned by the Vice Dean of Research in the previous REF cycle to write some guidance for our colleagues. So again, the premise of the checklist is that digital outputs must meet, obviously, research domain criteria, whether in history, linguistics, film studies, musicology, and so on. But also, they must meet digital research, software, for example, standards, and the like. But how do we ensure originality, significance, and rigor in this diverse format in an integrated manner, which was the topic we addressed yesterday? So the checklist tried to respond to that. Very important is it's designed collaboratively, and it's supposed to be used collaboratively. And I'm very that. So you'll notice that there's multi-authorship. If you open it up, you'll notice that all reviewers are mentioned of previous versions as well. The checklist tries to systematize, update, adapt previous efforts in digital humanities, where obviously digital outputs are key products. And it was mainly thought for website content and research databases assessment, but I should stress is applicable beyond digital humanities to other digital artifacts, such as datasets, software modules, data papers, and so on. It is underpinned by research software engineering good practices. What does that mean? So again, if you look at our King's Digital Lab website, you'll find out more about processes, for example, around archiving and sustainability, a static first development approach, project templates to guide our software development life cycle, and more recently, approaches to digital accessibility. So all these things are embedded in the checklist. How can you use it? In these B cells, I try to put in there some of the sections of the checklist. It's a modular structure, it's around 12, I believe, sections. And the idea is that all these elements, so credits, added value, edition version, licensing, ownership, copyright, and so on, should be thought of as elements to inform a project life cycle rather than just at the end for the assessment part. For each of these items in the checklist, you have a description, some guidance, some references, and in some cases, examples as well. Obviously, it's not perfect. It's a dynamic document. Do you want to improve it? Do you have ideas? You can contact us. But in the HiddenREF spirit, you can also make it your own. Try, test it. And again, in the good spirit of HiddenREF, please acknowledge us if you build on it. Ultimately, the checklist is a scaffolding to kind of enable collaborative work where the good honey really lies in good research. And in terms of cultural shift, I should stress that the idea is that research software engineering teams should be considered strategic peer collaborators. In either education institution, the aim should be to promote robust digital research practices, and this is done when indeed quality in digital output is not just about functionality, but it's about integrating research domain and research software engineering good practices. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Hello, all. So, I am Raissa. I'm based at the University of Essex. And this is a British Academy and Wellcome Trust funded project. We started March this year. And it's a 2 years duration project, and is a collaboration between the University of Essex and Heriot University. Our goal is to understand the importance of socialization and meaningful connections for neurodivergent workers in the UK. Although we have the Equality Act, right, that is important in terms of bringing structure and procedural accommodations for neurodivergent workers, there is a huge lack of awareness of the social change needed to better the neurodivergent workers' experience in the workplace. So we foresee an impact not only in terms of the neurodivergent workers' well-being, but also in terms of career progression, job satisfaction, and diminishing turnovers. So in which stage are we now? We collected over 30 interviews and over 250 survey answers, and our goal is to build a research report for HR managers and politicians, and also some digital artifacts. And for this, after finishing the analysis, we're going to have a co-creation event in March 2026. So there we are going to host stakeholders as entrepreneurs, HR managers, politicians, neuroinclusion specialists, and our goal is to build a collaboration and bring the social change that is needed, not only in terms of creating more awareness, but also improving the experience and bringing change in terms of leadership, HR practices. And we have here just a quote for one of our interviewees, and he was
very eager to discuss the importance of being authentic, because so far is what we've been seeing with our interviews, is that it's not a matter of delivering, of being successful in terms of accomplishing the tasks and delivering what is required in the workplace, but it's a matter of how authentic are you allowed to be in the workplace where you are, and how this impacts in the mental health regarding all the comorbidities and the issues that are associated with being neurodivergent in terms of anxiety, depression, and overlap with mental health issues. So if you would like to collaborate with us or anything, please get in touch, and this QR code is for our project page. Thank you.
Morning. My name is Akib. I'm a technical team leader at research at University of Hertfordshire. So, let's start with a simple truth. Research buildings are only as effective as the research they enable. Now, ask yourself, who really understands the heartbeat of those buildings? It's not always the PIs, not the architects, not the funders. It's actually the research technicians. They're the ones who actually know how a lab functions, what gets used, what overheats, what breaks, what clogs, and what actually keeps the science moving. Take a look at the slide. There are 3 overlapping circles: operational reality, architectural design, and research goals. And what's at the center of these circles? It is the technicians. They live right at the center of these circles. They're the link between what science wants to achieve, what gets built, and what's actually safe, usable, and compliant. And when they're not, expensive, irreversible mistakes do get made. Let's picture this. Imagine a £100 million building designed with no technician input. The benches are beautiful, but they're too high and too flimsy. The equipment does fit, but there's nowhere to load a sample in it. The fume hood vents into a bottleneck duct system that goes back into your offices. The safety showers, they flood the corridor with all the chemicals. There are no emergency shut-offs for compressed gases. Now, you might think this is hypothetical, but it actually happens all the time. Now, that's a really expensive mistake that has happened. Now, imagine if a research technician or a technician would have been in that design room. That's a £100 million mistake avoided. Why? Because someone knew the difference between the theoretical workflow and the real-life workflow, because it's the technician who knows the power load of each equipment. It's the technician who understands containment strategy required and the compliance required. It's the technician who manages and creates the workflows, and what? He was never consulted. Let's be clear. What do technicians really bring into architectural design? A, lived experience. They know how a lab functions during demand, in emergencies, under pressure. Technical insight, they know the power requirements, air changes, containment strategies, compliance, safety infrastructure required for specific research. Continuity, which is really important here. While researchers and projects always rotate, it's the technicians who often stay. They bring in long-term institutional memory that avoids repeating mistakes. Operational efficiency, they design for function, not just for appearance. They prevent design choices that hinder maintenance, safety, and usability. So, what should we do? If you're planning a new build, refurb, or even just a single lab redesign, let's bring research technicians in at the concept stage, not just as observers, but as real contributors. Let them highlight where the power supply is not hold up. Believe me, you get a lot of trips in the new buildings. Where the airflow doesn't meet the spec, right? Very complicated technical buildings required for research. Where the safety systems need an upgrade or they're no longer compliant with the legislation. Where the workflows need uninterrupted access. Research technicians are the unsung architects, hidden architects of science. They're not just support staff, they're the people who make the space work. When they're included in design, we build labs that are safer, smarter, sustainable, and ready for real research. Let's give them a seat at the table, because without them, we're actually designing in dark. Thank you.
Hi, so Emma Ganley from Protocols.io. Here to bang the drum today for methods as a foundational but very often unappreciated research output. I feel like methods are actually the central tenet of all different research disciplines. We think about something we want to research, there has to be a methodological approach to investigating that research question. I was astonished yesterday, digging more into REF, to realise that there is no submission specifically for methods on their own. And when chatting with a few people, how would you submit them? The answer was kind of under other, probably, not really sure, but definitely a realisation that perhaps they could be or they might be useful. There's an evolutionary biologist has a brilliant quote, quite an old one, that nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. I like to switch that and say that nothing in research data makes sense except in the light of how it was generated. We have to know how data were arrived at and produced for them to be useful for reuse, for reanalysis, down the line to actually understand them. There may be 4-star brilliant papers that are subsequently not reproducible because we do not have information about the methods that were used to actually perform the experiments or, probe the questions being asked there. I often like to show a cookie slide where all the different cookies are different in shape, form. They clearly probably have correlating different textures and tastes, but they were all generated from the same recipe that had had a few different tweaks made to the recipe. We don't know what the reason for the different taste or texture was unless we know what the tweak was to the method that was used. So in the same way throughout research, if you make changes, you're optimizing, you're developing your approach until you arrive at the solution that really works, you have to know what it was that you did with precision in a way that can be reproduced. To my mind, and I think many people agree, this is a really important research output in and of itself. On Protocols.io, which is one way that you can share methods, they look quite traditional. So for people assessing something that came from Protocols.io, probably wouldn't be too far of a stretch outside of comfort zone to understand what you're looking at. It has an abstract, it has a place for background, they can be cited, there are many metrics, but ultimately it's a big template which allows you to input any kind of step-by-step method. Very interestingly, the example I've got up here, you can see that the method is directly linked to a research paper. I often think about modular outputs for publishing or just for research in general. Researchers are not producing one output, they're producing many modular, different, distinct pieces, and they often interlink with one another. So in this instance, the paper had about 37,000 views, while the method on Protocols.io has had about 127,000 views. Arguably, the ongoing utility of these outputs can be much more significant from the method than from the paper itself. There's a wonderful example from a researcher in Birmingham, Josh Quick. He published a coronavirus sequencing protocol very early on in 2020. So although these outputs look traditional, they can be output as a PDF, they're actually incredibly dynamic. You can create new versions and other users can make forks, which is their own private version that they can then adapt and change. Josh Quick's method, shared then very early on in the pandemic, has been viewed over 250,000 times. It has had many, many forks and versions been used worldwide. Many low and middle income country researchers have made use of that method to adapt to whatever they had available in their particular location. So this dynamic tool can still look traditional, feel a bit safe, but it's really critical. We reflect intellectual innovation with methods. This is people who spend a really long time developing methods to make sure that we know what they've done and how they've done it. It can be a really long time, maybe the main bulk of work may go into getting something to work before you actually are able to apply it to a research question and derive any kind of results. Really critical for reproducibility and rigor, can have hugely impactful meaning cross-disciplinary ways. You only find that when you make the method discoverable as an independent output. If it's buried within a few narrative paragraphs in a paper, that is completely unrecognizable as something that might relate across disciplines. Ultimately, they create infrastructure for discovery. I think they are foundational for reliable, valid, and meaningful results, and they can be hugely impactful and significant as a research output. Often, sometimes it might be core facilities, research technicians who are deriving these methods too, and they do not have the opportunity to submit to REF, but actually they should be allowed to do that. So I've been given a symbol to stop, so I'll stop there. Please do consider them as a first-class research and should be submitted to REF. So thank you.
Okay, good morning everyone. I'm Jenny Evans, I'm Research Environment and Scholarly Communications Lead at the University of Westminster, and depending on which submission system you use, Project Lead or PI on ENACT, which I'll talk a bit about today. I'll begin today with what is practice research, why it's unique, and what does it offer us in a scientific research reward and recognition system and scholarly communications landscape that assumes a single, often text-based approach. It is research that's created by making or doing, for example, performance. It tends to rely on a mix of intuitive and subjective processes in tandem with strong insider knowledge or specialist knowledge of their specific, often but not always, artistic field. It involves and it values a wide range of contributors within and from outside the academy. It generates research narratives not well described by existing structures. Researchers in practice research fields value the process and practice as much as the end product, as research insights often emerge here. The perception of the outputs these researchers create as non-traditional research outputs often focus on format, sound, image, even exhibition. The practice research lens enables us to focus on the practice process and the end product, where the research may be found within or may need articulation by a research narrative, important as it contextualizes those research insights. ENACT is founded in 2 AHRC Scoping Future Data Services project, Practice Research Voices, and Sustaining Practice Assets for Research, Knowledge, Learning and Engagement, known as SPARKLE. These research projects engage with a range of stakeholders with a role in creating and or sharing practice research. And our top 5 for findable, accessible, interoperable and reusable or fair practice research are: engagement and co-design with all communities is key to success. We need a national practice research repository that transforms the capture and presentation of practice research, process and outputs, that balances out that need for display and flexibility and schema or structure. Approaches to development need to be incremental and scalable, using community-backed open infrastructure principles. Some level of underpinning structure is needed to embed practice research in that global information and open standards landscape, and there is a need to build capacity and skills across all communities. Documenting a structure and how this relates to that global conversation and enabling FAIR. So we documented a schema to describe the structures needed for practice research. Key elements included contributorship and attribution that go beyond current models, context, provenance, rights and licensing for creative and collaborative works, portfolio concepts that integrate process documentation with outcomes, time-based and process elements essential for understanding and reuse. This structured approach is needed to better integrate with global information standards and persistent identifiers to make practice research fair and to ensure practice researchers benefit from a scholarly infrastructure, or plumbing as I call it, that scientists take for granted. Has anyone tried to upload anything to ResearchFish of late that isn't a journal article or a scientific data set? It's really quite hard work. Global discussions are going on at the Research Data Alliance. We're looking to expand this community and building an interest group. So we want more input from communities and so ask you to join. A little bit about REF. So going beyond REF outputs and open access, we absolutely acknowledge the role that REF plays in valuing practice research, multi-component, multimodal outputs, and the amount of time that's invested in preparing those submissions. However, by making practice research fair and capturing the input into REF submissions and recognising the skills and expertise needed to enable this, we achieve the benefits of fair practice research and enable a more inclusive and diverse and open research culture, where process and end product more visible, and the system enables and saves people time. FAIR enables access, which might be open access, and respect for all those communities who contribute to the creation of knowledge. Enact Core, which is what we've initially been funded for, will build infrastructure that enables culture change. I, as project lead, am leading an expert team made up by academic discipline and domain, so repositories, research data, open research, library and archives-based experts. It is this collaboration that's our strength. A huge thank you to my project team, all of those people at Westminster, across our research office and procurement, IT, who've supported this work, and to UKRI Digital Research Infrastructure funding of AHRC's Infrastructure for Digital Arts and Humanities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm Sarah from the University of Birmingham, from Birmingham Business School. And I'm Indy Toral, and we have another Sarah who's not here today. She's in Dubai. But we work in retail, so we often say it's buy one, get one free. So you get buy one, get one free. And really, what... Can you speak to the microphone? Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah. So really, what we wanted to do and what we set out to explore is actually the invisible labour behind the work that's happening in our HEIs. And we came across this project quite a number of years ago, but the irony is we were so busy actually doing the invisible labour, it took us several years to kind of get to it. And we called it wife work because we wanted to kind of reference the sort of pejorative kind of nature that women's work is often referred to in the media. But I think it's very important to say that we acknowledge that actually these invisible tasks can actually affect anybody at any level and on any contract. But importantly, what we started doing is we started gathering lots of evidence and diary keeping. And what we identified is that there is a substantive body of invisible labour that actually keeps our HEIs actually functional. It keeps them going. But as we've heard just previously, often this actually isn't acknowledged. Sorry, the timing's just slightly gone. We're trying to jump onto the Wi-Fi. So we started trying to understand what was actually happening, why this invisible labour was occurring. But what we did identify quite critically is that particularly women were taking on these types of what we called non-promotable tasks. But when it actually came, for example, for promotions, when it came for REF, actually, these fundamentally weren't counted. And I think another factor that we put into this as well is around the kind of social capital. So particularly for those of us who are first generation at universities, if you actually don't know the language, if you don't know actually what you should and shouldn't be doing, we identified that in particular we were collecting these non-promotable tasks. I'll hand over to Inchi for the last 2 minutes. Do you want to?
So we did the traditional way of researching, and we used autoethnography, and this is a continuing project. We used the neoliberalist theory as well as institutional theory, and what these tell you is the regulations, laws, our understanding of how we, we are bound by societal norms as well as our cognitive thoughts and processes. We actually think that these invisible works are our jobs, and other people think that this is our job, somebody's job. Somebody has to do this. So our findings, if we talk about our findings, these are tasks like emotional labor when you're talking to a student. For instance, if you're doing a tutorial, it's not 5 minutes, it's going to be perhaps an hour. We are doing also other tasks like turning up for the open days. If you're applying for a big grant, that's not your job because you have that big grant and you can win awards, get promoted because of that, and somebody has to do that open day. Somebody has to do that extra hour with the students or other colleagues, support other colleagues. So this is what we discovered, and we are continuing because this is an agency issue, because of metrics and all the things that we have to do. Like yesterday, for instance, we were talking about librarians are technicians. We all support the research. It's an institutional systemic issue which has an agency issue inside it. At the moment, we are working on it. We are going to be doing some interviews. We did a hackathon, and we are going to present it in a couple of months' time at SRHE, and we are calling for action. Please contact us. I know our names are not here, but you can find us.
We have a red card.
Yeah, okay, I'm finishing. Yeah, and please join us, and we need to do that action. We need to be part of the HiddenREF and do that action. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Gareth Bish, the Sales Director for UK and Ireland for Coherent Digital, and I'm honoured to be here today at this wonderful conference with my esteemed colleague, Toby Green, co-founder of Coherent and publisher of Policy Commons. So the title is Using Grey Literature, or as I've learned over the last few days, non-traditional outputs to uncover real-world impact. Non-traditional outputs are current, relevant, credible, valuable, and often undiscoverable, potentially negating their real-world impact. Problem is twofold. As we've seen throughout the conference, research output is increasingly published in non-traditional formats. Non-traditional outputs are considered grey literature and are not covered by traditional databases, which makes their output less discoverable, not only reducing impact, as well as the ability to evidence impact. And researchers require access to their research outputs, the research outputs of others, but this material is not only hard to find, but can also be transient in availability, creating yet another challenge for those conducting comprehensive research. So to address this, while traditional discovery services focus inside academia, Policy Commons and Applied Science Commons focus on research organisations outside academia. Think tanks, IGOs, NGOs, research centres, health organisations, you get it. From the initial launch of 2 million items, Coherent Digital now has a significant corpus of grey literature in excess of 30 million publications from organisations across the globe, in subject areas such as AI, climate science, energy, health inequalities, sustainable cities and science, and so on. On an average day, we're adding more than 1,000 publications every hour. To provide a pertinent example of what we do, you may be interested to know that we are preserving and rescuing important information removed from the public domain, including by the US federal government. So to date, we've rescued nearly 600,000 items from organisations such as the CDC, USAID, DHS, Department of Homeland Security, EPA, and 80 more institutions. We make them openly available to all in Policy Commons Open Collection. That's openly available to everyone in the room. Touching on some comments yesterday regarding curation and metadata, every item added to Policy Commons has a persistent identifier, a COI, a coherent objective identifier. It works just like a DOI, but it is better adapted for NTOs, and it's cheaper. NTOs can be added to Policy Commons platform by anyone in the room through the upload tool, providing a quick and easy way to circulate and preserve outputs easily, with a global reach of hundreds of thousands of researchers and librarians. On doing so, it will be provided not only the metadata, but the portability to be included anywhere on the net. And this could apply to non-traditional outputs such as blogs, podcasts, videos, as well as conference papers and the like. So whether you're a researcher, a research manager, or a research librarian, please visit our stand to see what we're all about. If you'd like your own research units or centres to be included in our service, we're more than happy to do that for you. Thank you.
Hi everyone. So I'm Caroline. I'm Director of Operations at the University of Bath's Institute for Mathematical Innovation. And IMI's role is to bring mathematical expertise and rigor to data-driven research and consultancy projects. And our driving force is a team of fantastic mathematical innovation researchers. They're a type of digital research technical professional, and they're skilled at working across disciplines and with non-academic sectors. So the good, the bad, and the ugly came about as a thought exercise to encourage a more open, supportive, and collaborative culture in IMI. So since 2022, the team has more than doubled in size to almost 15 people, which has resulted in us maybe not knowing each other as well compared to when we were a smaller group, and discussions were becoming less spontaneous, less in depth, and focusing more on things going well. And so we wanted to try to facilitate talking about more than just getting funding and new publications, and hopefully bring to light useful information that might otherwise remain hidden, with the added benefit of not repeating each other's mistakes and progressing towards more of a collective solutions mindset rather than one centering on individual success. So at the ARMA conference in June, Rachel Prasad from Guild HE talked about de-risking talking about things not going well. And wouldn't it be great to feel as comfortable sharing the good as well as the not so good? IMI has a big team of smart people with all of this collective knowledge, and we should be able to learn from and appreciate each other's successes as well as not successes. Yeah, so how are we doing the good, the bad, and the ugly? I have to confess, we've only just started. Once my abstract was accepted, we had to hurry. So we're kicking off with an activity during our monthly team catch-ups where we'll share with each other something that we're excited about, so the good, something we're kind of meh about, so the bad, and something that's flopping, or the ugly. And we have ground rules, including only talking about what we're comfortable sharing and receiving information with compassion, trust, and respect. And as a team, we've developed a format based on active listening, which involves getting into small groups of about 2 to 4, each person sharing something good, bad, and ugly, followed by time to discuss. And then we come back together, and the rest of the session is an opportunity for individuals to discuss any challenges in more detail with the rest of the group if they want more advice. So I was the first, and so far I'm the only person to give it a go, which I did with the group as a whole. And it was actually quite challenging to talk about my ugly of needing to come up with new strategies to generate more research activity so that the IMI has projects and research income going into the future. And I had all sorts of reasons for why I shouldn't talk about this, so it's my responsibility, I should be able to figure it out, people are going to think I can't do my job, it's a silly problem, you know, blah, blah, blah. But it was actually an incredibly positive thing to do. So the team contributed tons of actionable ideas, which did mean more work for some of us, but that's okay because we're sharing the work and now we're doing something about it rather than just me freaking out. So hopefully, as we do this more often, the good, bad, and ugly will encourage more openness and problem solving, more understanding of each other's work, and we'll be able to collectively support and celebrate our work. So yeah, so thanks for listening, and I'd love to hear about any activities that you're carrying out at your own institution.
Hello everyone, good morning. My name is Jyoti. I hope you have been enjoying the events since yesterday, and welcome to those who joined today. I am co-founder of RSE Asia and also an SSI Fellow 2025. I am a statistician by background, and this is the first ever HiddenREF event that I'm attending. So we launched the RSE community back in 2021. Very interestingly, tomorrow, which is the International RSE Day, coincides with the launch of our community, and we would be celebrating our 4-year anniversary tomorrow. So the QR code will lead you to my social links. Please feel free to connect with me. These are the different projects that I contribute to. So as George Cadbury says, the best investment you can make is in people. I will be speaking today about community as an infrastructure, and will share about the different activities we have been doing over the past 1 year or so as part of RSE Asia efforts. So So this is a community conversation series that we run from October 2025 to March 2020, October 2024 to March 2025. This was on the topic enabling open science through research code. We had over 200 registrations for each episode, and we also created a lots of learning materials which are openly shared, and the same can be viewed through the QR code on the screen. I would like to dedicate the success of this event to the intentional planning that we put behind the scenes. A little bit more about the outreach activities we did over the past year. So during March 2025, we had a community meetup at FOSS Asia Summit at Bangkok. We also presented about user personas in research software at APAN 60 conference in Hong Kong in July 2025. We shared about our community conversation series at RSECon through a poster and a lightning talk. In mid-September, we organized our annual flagship event, Research Software Asia Australia 2025, which this was the 4th edition. And one of the key feedback we get from it is this is one week where people from isolated RSC communities get to recognize themselves as RSCs. And one of the recent outreach activities that we did was at Open Data Camp 10 at University of Edinburgh, where I ran a workshop on using art as a method or a lens to look at open collaborative projects. To extend our outreach activities, we have signed our first ever MOU with Asia Pacific Advanced Network. This is quite a milestone for us, given that we have been driving the efforts voluntarily since the past 4 years. You can scan the QR code on the screen to have the most recent updates from RSC Asia. And those are some beautiful pictures from Birmingham. Thank you very much.
Do we have Holly? Yes, Holly's ready. Can I take this moment to ask if Eliza is in the room? Excellent.
So hello everyone, I'm Holly, I'm the Head of Open Research at the University of Sheffield. And I'm presenting the headline findings from a series of 3 focus groups conducted in July this year to understand the diverse forms of non-traditional or non-text research outputs created at the University of Sheffield beyond the research article. Supported by Research England Enhancing Research Culture funding, the focus groups were held in support of a top-level aim to raise awareness of and develop the university's support and services for non-traditional research outputs, thus increasing both their internal visibility and external discoverability. And the focus groups have laid the foundations for this work by fostering dialogue around the diversity of research outputs that are created and by surfacing all the diverse forms of non-traditional research outputs created at the university. The focus group discussions were guided by a set of prompts. We asked our participants about the kinds of diverse outputs they create, the language that they use to describe these non-traditional research outputs, the socio-cultural and technical challenges, barriers and disincentives to produce and share these diverse forms of research. We also asked participants what they felt the value of non-traditional research was and how, or even if, existing principles of research excellence and research integrity, such as transparency, rigour, significance, were applicable to, or how they were demonstrated by these diverse forms of research. So 27 researchers took part in the focus groups from disciplines as diverse as creative writing, linguistics, politics, clinical medicine and aerodynamics engineering. And we found that researchers were engaged in and produced many forms of knowledge outputs, including videos, podcasts, commentaries, data notes, interactive sensory exhibitions, models of building acoustics, co-created poetry, and even a final report submitted to a research funder in the form of a manga. In terms of the language used to describe these diverse forms of research, some participants felt that non-traditional was an always already inherently biased phrase. As one participant reminded me, non-traditional to whom? And while other participants felt it was a phrase that could be reclaimed positively as a form of resistance to tradition, with non-traditional forms of research positioned as a bulwark against text-based research's amenability to being consumed by and polluted by generative AI. Now, preliminary analysis of the transcripts has also found that researchers emphasised the value of non-traditional forms of research as expansive and creative and transformative modes of investigation, as well as diverse forms of dissemination. And then when asked to define the qualities of excellence of non-traditional forms of research, our participants consistently emphasised principles of transparency and ethics, accountability to one's research participants, and resonance with one's participants and or public, by which they meant the presentation of research in a form that was meaningful and comprehensible to different forms of communities, including sometimes non-literate communities. One group even suggested that perhaps the relevant audience themselves should be the ones to adjudicate excellence. And finally, in terms of remaining barriers, researchers cited the hierarchical, conservative, metrics-based and risk-averse nature of research institutions as the most significant barrier to the production, dissemination and recognition of non-traditional forms of research, particularly for early career researchers who just can't afford to take those risks. However, our researchers ultimately felt that the lack of visibility of and recognition for non-traditional forms of research was ultimately more of a technological problem than it was an epistemological one. That is, that the infrastructure gap, the current inability to digitally represent many of these non-traditional forms of research, was more of a challenge than the lack of recognition of these outputs as valid forms of knowledge. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Elisa. I was based at Imperial College London. At the moment I'm looking for my next opportunity. So you will see some of the problems that the PRISMS community has, as you're probably aware, a lot of communities within education. So I changed a little bit the title of my presentation to the role of PRISMS in research assessment, but this can also be applied. I mean, research assessment, we all know that is tightly related to how research is done, and is part of the encouragement of how we do things in research. And how the PRISM community it gets involved in this. So first of all, I would like to invite you all to get involved with this community of practice. You might not know, but it stands for the Professional Research Investment and Strategy Managers, and you can get in contact with Isabella here, who's running it at the moment. It's a great community. We share practice in the sense of how to get things done. We also do training courses, professional development opportunities, mentoring. It's just a good community to just go and talk to people about what you're working and how to get things done. Sometimes we don't realize that a lot of things that people are working within professional support roles within universities have a lot of things in common. You know, sometimes you want to organize an event or you want to get involved in some sort of activity, and it's just good to know how other people are doing these type of things. Just a few stats about the PRISM community. A lot of us identify as female, so the vast majority of them were women. 70% are highly educated, a lot of people with PhD. So this is people that are very well trained, that come with a research background, that know how things are done. A lot of them even with postdocs or fellowships, that stayed or came back to university environments. A lot of them have a lot of work experience, more than 11 years working around universities. And this is a reality, 52% employed in fixed-term contracts. This is a big, big problem. It has a lot of implications. These people, very well versed in research management, these people that get involved in getting money, getting funding, involved in how funding applications are made, and therefore, of course, have a very good idea of how research is assessed and how to pitch research and research findings to get funding, which is essential, of course, to keep doing research, and yet unable to access funding themselves to keep developing or career development opportunities. REF panels, for example. I personally am very interested in the REF. I would like to participate, but not with a fixed-term contract, because I don't know where I'm going to be next. A lot of people have these problems. And I think this particular role is very well versed into knowing how research is made. A lot of us have many hats. I've been a scientific editor previously, so have a lot of different experiences that make us well placed into knowing how things are, what the problems are, and maybe some ideas on how to fix them. But it's just the opportunities are not really there to do it. And I just give a brief example. This is just me interested in meta science, but it's just an example how there are exclusivity situations within getting funding opportunities. So I welcome that UKRI are making an effort to try to be more inclusive into which roles getting access to funding. But then when you actually go and see what, for example, in this opportunity for data science, for meta science, what you need to say to get access is please give an example of how you have conducted research to maximize its usefulness to policymakers. If you haven't conducted research yourself, because you have professional staff, then you can't really participate. So the call is open for everyone, and they want to encourage prisms, for example, professional staff to participate, but at the same time asking for research that you produce yourself, which is contradictory, right? Because you're not in a role that produces research. So I just want to put this out there for us to reflect and have a discussion on how we can make these changes so that we're actually inclusive, because a lot of the things that people work on and the knowledge that we create and we generate doesn't necessarily come as a research. I mean, we've discussed a lot of not traditional outputs. Sometimes we can't even put it in somewhere. We just have these ideas of what things can be done, and we just come and participate and share. But yeah, just put it out there for us to discuss. Thank you.
It's all on one screen. I might just bring it through. Right. Hello, everyone. I'm here today to talk about a platform called Octopus, which unfortunately I didn't put a link to on the slide. So you can find it at octopus.ac. It's probably worth mentioning. And first, just to give a bit of context for what I'll be talking about, it would be best just to give a little bit of a description about what the platform actually is. So essentially, the idea behind the platform is that what journals are sort of being forced to do in the current system is to satisfy two roles. On the one hand, they're the place for a narrative, for disseminating a narrative account of how results were reached to a relatively general audience, whilst on the other hand, they're somewhat being pigeonholed into being the place where specialist communication occurs about exactly what was done, when and by whom, things like the methods and so on. And the idea behind Octopus is to provide a dedicated space to share those details, to share that latter role in which there is all sorts of messy bits of the research process alongside very useful pieces that aren't really given enough focus in a journal article, like the methods, data sets, any code that might have been used or created by that project. And so the way that it works, let's see if I get the right button here, is by breaking down essentially the entire research project into a series of steps. So we start with a research question or a research problem. This is just what don't we know, effectively. We move through into a rationale and approach, a hypothesis. There are many words for this. Then on into how we did it, the method. Further on, we have our data, evidence, sources, whatever it may be. And then we start looking at what we can tell from that objective study, that data or evidence, so the analysis. Moving further on, there's the interpretation, and finally the applications or implications of that work. And crucially, as you can see here up on the screen, there doesn't have to be a single instance of each of these parts of the research project, because that's not how we do research. You might find that there are blind alleys, that there are bits of analysis that you do that never make it into the final article. Perhaps you've got multiple hypotheses and you're not going to be able to look at all of those. With Octopus, you have a place where you can put all of these in there and link them together to form a more realistic representation of what you actually did and how you did it. And crucially, these don't actually have to be the same people working on each of these steps. So you have a separate DOI and a separate author list for each of these publications. And I, as just an interested party, could come in and have a look at the data perhaps that you generated as part of your research and publish my own analysis on the back of it. So this creates a few new interesting ways of working around a slightly more sort of free-form process of collaboration, wherein people can suggest hypotheses on other people's research questions and all sorts of things like that. But what I really want to talk today is about how rethinking the process of publication and breaking it down into these kind of fundamental steps allows for us to think about research assessment in a few new ways. So first I'll start off with what we have at the moment, and then I'll move into what we're building, and then finally there's a little bit of what we could do with this down the line. So at the moment, I'll talk in particular about our peer reviews, which I'm not sure if they're going to appear on this diagram. That's our research questions that you can link to anything. There's our reviews. So the peer review on Octopus just looks at an individual one of these steps or publications. So for instance, I could just peer review a method and not really be concerning myself about the results or about the research question or any, but just write a much shorter and more specialized review that looks at this one specific element of a project, which hopefully makes them a bit easier to write and a bit less time consuming and also more useful. These are post-publication and open, and therefore there's not an element of sort of gatekeeping, and there's not pressure on the reviewer wherein they could be having a significant effect upon someone's career based upon the feedback they give. So hopefully this makes for a slightly more collaborative form of peer review. It's a bit easier to approach. We don't have any barriers to publishing on the platform. It's entirely free to read on and free to write, and because of that, employing editorial staff would probably make the business model for this not work. So instead, we need a way for the community to police themselves, and that's where the second form of research assessment we have in the platform at the moment comes in, which is our red flags. So you can imagine there's perhaps a concern you have about a publication that's slightly more major than a peer review. We give users the option to flag a concern with that publication, where they can pick from one of a number of categories: misrepresentation, ethical issues, copyright, whatever it may be. And just raise a little bit of feedback about what that concern is, open up the dialogue with those authors so that they can discuss it and hopefully work towards resolving that red flag, or at least allowing the authors to put their counter-argument forward. And all of that is conducted publicly and available against the publication on the site for other readers to see, so that all of this is done in the open. I'll stop there, I think I talked for too long.
Hi everyone, very exciting to be here. So I'll just quickly introduce myself. So I'm Associate Professor Catherine Maffiletti. I'm Faculty Research Practice Lead in the Faculty of Law, Arts and Social Sciences at University of Greenwich. And I'd like to also introduce my amazing collaborator, Hannah Wilson, who's Open Research, Open Access and Scholarly Communications Officer in the Greenwich Research and Innovation Hub. She's over there, giving a wave. Okay, so we're presenting on Towards New Ways of Knowing, Practice, Knowledge Exchange, and Beyond. The REF hasn't historically been open or set up necessarily for practice-based research submissions, and creatives in UK universities have persevered. Feedback and further explorations by REF has revealed that practice-led impact case studies, certainly from 2014, have the capacity to score highly because the activities can be better represented through the multi-component outputs or non-traditional outputs. At University of Greenwich, we're exploring a new training process and support framework to feed into REF preparation processes so that single and multi-component outputs are recognised and valued alongside traditional outputs. The transferability of output submissions now in REF 2029 to different UOAs also presents an opportunity to develop single and multi-component outputs for disciplines that aren't defined as participating in creative arts. Promoting interdisciplinarity, disciplines can learn from this as an alternative model to use as outputs in their UOA submissions. Using the multi-component output method has the potential to help identify, develop, and acknowledge practice-based and/or knowledge exchange activities as potentially being research work in non-creative areas and disciplines, because the method itself can enable these activities to be understood beyond the illegible, tacit processes often typically associated with practice ways of working. The applicability of single and multi-component output development in main panel D, largely in UOA 32 for art and design, is vast. The key here is around culture and whether usual disciplinary approaches would enable this and engage this method. Practice norms in output assessment in disciplines is also a challenge. While we wrestle with definitions, categorizations, and specific meanings of criteria of excellence and scoring, the slippage between practice research-led multi-component outputs and their impact case study counterparts and knowledge exchange activities developed to create research questions and multi-component outputs and impact case studies lingers on. There are productive comparisons to be made, not only between these in order to determine their distinctiveness, that is, the tendency to create clear divisions between them, rather we should consider more closely their semblances. Multi-component outputs, yes, they evidence practice research excellence, let's say, and impact case studies aim to evidence impact. Fine. These approaches remain distinctive, while their composite structures bear an undeniable kinship. So I think that that's really worth sort of reconsidering as a whole. Perhaps by taking this approach, we might be afforded a clearer possibility for an alignment and comparison for traditional research assessors, rather than traditional research outputs sort of versus practice-based research outputs. We can think more sort of laterally between multi-component outputs and impact case studies and those structures. And of course, with a consideration of how knowledge exchange participates within both of these areas. We are also at University of Greenwich reconsidering the peer review model and how, when we think about this, can expertise be measured when structures for review operate necessarily differently in context of, for example, practice research? The levels at which we can identify, indeed make visible research practice if the traditional measures refuse the operations specific to creative practices to that discipline. The problem remains, how do we read practice submissions when we try to fit peer review identifiers and review systems that can't necessarily read what we do? Our ambition in higher education should be to identify, support, and champion all kinds of knowledges without simply leaning on established norms and hierarchies of knowledge production. Practitioners, knowledge exchange workers, research technicians, professional services need better representation institutionally and externally in all disciplines for research. Wielding this change could make for a richer, decolonized, more inclusive representation of knowledges that can challenge the class-based hierarchies of knowledge in the academy and the REF today. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Stuart King from Loughborough University, and I'm pleased to be here today to be talking about the work that we've been doing to develop evidence-informed output narratives, or EONs, to support fairer internal assessments, namely those related to academic promotions, by making them more sensitive to disciplinary context
and more inclusive of these non-traditional diverse output types we've been talking about for the last 2 days. So before I continue, I'd like to take the time to quickly acknowledge the people who've contributed to this work, and those not named on the slides are those who have played the biggest parts, but to also recognise those colleagues from across our research community who have co-created this approach with us, which we have developed collaboratively using the scope framework for responsible research evaluation from iNorms. I'll also point out the QR code that you can see on the slide. If you scan that, you'll be taken to the web page that has the guidance about what I'm talking about, and also the contact email, which I've missed from the slide, if you'd like to get in touch. So to kind of zoom back a bit, why did we do this change? So I don't need to, for this audience, talk about the lack of applicability of the traditional metrics when looking at the non-traditionally submitted outputs. And the reason we focus on this is because this gap, this issue, was really undermining colleagues' confidence in submitting those sorts of outputs for that type of work, that type of research, for their promotion applications. And this was happening even though, sort of in parallel, there was a transition to using a narrative format for that process. But what was missing was that guidance on what should be included in that narrative, what types of evidence would be understood to evidence quality, and how would it then be judged. So EONs have kind of stepped in to fill that gap by sort of complementing that short narrative format that is included in the promotion process with a flexible menu of evidence across the 3 categories on there, so contribution, quality and visibility, that researchers can then choose to draw upon those types of evidence when drafting those statements for promotion applications or any other internal assessment now. Crucially, this menu isn't one size fits all. Each of the university's schools have weighted those different categories of evidence according to what matters most in their disciplines, as such giving sort of researchers and those assessing these statements a shared understanding of what it is that Loughborough values on these outputs and how they should correspondingly be assessed. Just want to highlight that we have tested this approach, it's quite new, but we've tested this approach with a pilot conducted last year with 10 recently promoted academics who participated by drafting a short narrative based on some guidance we provided and then give us feedback. And the findings from that were quite encouraging in that for those colleagues who were looking to submit a non-traditionally submitted output, they said that the evidence menus were really helpful for them to know what they should be including. And for those colleagues who were submitting outputs, journal articles they would have traditionally submitted anyway, they said that the guidance was no better or worse than the previous guidance, so it wasn't really disadvantaging them either. So where we are now is that the EONs have been included as optional guidance ahead of our next round of promotions, and we will be monitoring their uptake, as well as looking to refine materials that we provide to sort of support training on that, and also looking to expand their use in other processes across the university. So to sort of summarise for us, we think the key strengths for this approach is that provision of that transparency and flexibility, and we feel that that means that it could be very adaptable to be reused by others in different contexts, and we hope that, yes, it will be useful for those, particularly talking about topics today, looking to find ways to assess outputs that are not traditionally submitted to assessment exercises. Thank you.
First, can I check I didn't miss anyone? Impromptu lightning talk, anyone? Thanks very much for everyone for all of those talks. I think that we need a collective round of applause for everyone. So I don't know about everyone else, but I've always found lightning talks to be my favourite thing about an event. You just get a whole host of information in a condensed format, short amount of time, and then I know exactly who it is that I want to follow up with afterwards, or, you know, they've shared a website to go and look at, and I just love that. So hopefully you guys find the same. So I can see conversations happening on Slido already, which is great, and thank you to most of you who have put your names on there, because that makes my life easier, as I said. These are going to disappear at some point this afternoon, so I'll make sure that we move the conversations over to Slack, just so you can see the kind of things that were asked and just literally keep these conversations going. So what kind of things did we have? We had someone ask Emma about the disciplinary spread across the protocols IO users. She's answered it already. If you want to find out, either look at there or go to Slack. It's just to save me from clicking too many buttons, to be perfectly honest. We had someone initially agreeing with Aki about why technicians should be leaders at unis and sitting in the right meetings, and plenty of people agreeing with that as well, and actually someone sharing a helpful link for him as well as other participants here at the event. We had one person who had several questions about Octopus for Tim, so make sure you see them and you can answer, hopefully. I'm sure you're the right person for that job. And then I can basically see, let me double check, the same things are getting all the thumbs up, okay? We seem to all be on the same page, nice. Basically, yeah, various other questions that our speakers will likely be keen to answer, and like I say, I'm going to make sure, put them over to Slack. Can you tell that I really want you guys over there and keeping all these conversations going? I'm going to keep you there forever, and we'll tell you about all of the good things that we're going to be doing in the future on there as well. So thanks again for the lightning talks. I am going to hand over to Simon, who's going to tell us about our next workshop, and then in case he forgets, we are going to be leaving from here to the event suite, but I realise some of you are probably going to need a toilet break, so feel free, when you leave here, head to the loo.
Thank you, Lindsay. In case you forget, she's worked with me for so long. So I'm here to talk about another part of the work that we're doing today. I don't know which direction these slides are going in, so not that direction. Hey, here we go. So James talked earlier on today about the fact that we were funded this year, and that was a really incredibly exciting thing for us. So beforehand, we were a volunteer-led campaign, and we were fighting for all the breadth of outputs and roles and everything that you've heard about today in the lightning talks. And it's one thing to be like this volunteering campaign because it's exciting and you're pushing with no resources at all to make changes happen. And then the REF comes, Research England come along and they say, well, maybe you need to apply for funding to do this properly. So you get that funding, and it starts on the 1st of January. And on that day, you wake up and you realise all of these problems that have eluded Research England and the REF and all these other people for all of these years are now your problem. And you have to solve it somehow or another because you've said you'd do it in a bit. We have been doing a lot of various different activities, as I'll talk about later in the day. But the thing that was really been keeping me up at night is it's like we've got all of these NTOs. These are just the ones that were in the 2021 REF, right? So they're not all of the additional ones that we could have in the 2029 REF. These are just the ones that we know about at the moment. All of these, and I know about one of them, and I don't even know that much about that one. So what we need to do is we need to collect together expertise and understanding for all of these different types of output categories, and that's what this next thing is all about. We've had this idea of putting together every time the wrong way, of expert groups. So what the idea here is that it's pointless me trying to tell you how to deal with an artifact or a composition or something that I don't know about. There's plenty of people out there in the research community who know all about them. So we're going to bring together these people into groups, and we're going to use their expertise to fill all the gaps in information that exist. So how do you assess a composition or a patent or a design? How do you deal with the kind of issues with just realizing where those outputs are and trying to get out to the right communities to ensure that they understand that these can be submitted to the REF? And then also to act as like sounding boards as we try and make changes with the HiddenREF and try to get them adopted into the mainstream REF. Then what are we not seeing because we don't understand these disciplinary areas? Expert groups are our solution to this, and we are starting to build them in the next session. So here's the plan. So as Lindsay reminded me, and I have remembered to say, there is a comfort break. So it takes 10 minutes or 15 minutes, or whatever is required after this session, and then we'll congregate in the event suite. So that is where we were having coffee this morning. On the tables in the event suite, you will see images like this with a QR code on posters and represent each of the NTO categories that I've been discussing about. So you look around the room, you find the NTO that you're interested in talking about, and then you will find, hopefully, your tribe. You might not be the only person who cares about artifacts in this room. There might be a large bunch of people there.
We want you just to discuss with that group the kind of things that we need to keep in mind when it comes to putting an expert group together to represent this NTO, anything that we need to know about them that maybe the people without expertise and specialist knowledge won't know. We want you to have a discussion around that area. There's a QR code on every single poster. If you scan that, it will take you to a form. And on that form, we're asking you for some really vitally important information for the next phases of this project. So we are asking you for, if you would like to be one of the experts in this group, then you can put your name and you can also put your email address so we can get in touch with you. If there are other people or groups or organizations that we should be talking to, then we'd like them listed. You can give people's names, but please don't give email addresses. You're not allowed to do that. We will find them and we'll identify where they work, and we'll get in touch ourselves. And then there's a large paragraph of empty space where you can write down everything that we need to know, that you know about this particular NTO. And then if you manage to work your way through that entire form and you've had all your discussions and you feel that there's another NTO that would benefit from your expertise, then please feel free to mingle around the other tables and join into any of the other conversations. So we've got probably about 50 minutes once we've had a break for this session, which takes us up to 1 o'clock when we have lunch, and that is also in the event suite. It's also in the event suite, so you'll be in exactly the right area. We'll clear those poster boards down and we'll go straight into lunch. The next session will be, do you want to do this announcement or shall I? Straight into the next session after lunch. I'll hand over to you, shall I? And I'll hand over to James for that last bit because I have forgotten that bit.
Wrong way, I do it too. So yes, the next session after lunch will be celebrating our HiddenREF winners, and that'll be at 2 o'clock, so we'll have a whole hour for lunch. Just a reminder for those following online, this means that effectively you'll come back to us at 2 o'clock. Okay, thank you. So take a break and then join us in there.
Hello, everyone. Hello, can we have your attention? Sorry, you just had loads of time to chat as well. No, welcome back. I hope you guys all enjoyed the last session. You're excited about being part of expert groups and you've signed up with a little QR code and then enjoyed some lunch. I thought that was quite nice personally. So we're on to our next session, which is celebrating the HiddenREF competition winners. You probably already know we've held 2 competitions. So we had one in 2021 and another in 2024. We had over 200 submissions in total, and we heard about loads of fantastic work. The panels worked together to assess the submissions, and we ended up having 7 winners in 2021 with 12 highly commended entries, and then another 6 winners in 2024 with another 12 highly commended. Today we are getting to hear from 3 of these winners. And the first one is been a pre-recorded talk because that person was unable to be here, but technology allows us to do these things. It's really great if it works. So we'll be hearing from Holly Blake, who was the winner of Communicative Outputs in 2021 for a digital package for mitigating the psychological impact of COVID-19 on health and care workers. Let's see if I can get it to work. Oh yeah, thank you, James.
Hello, I'm Holly Blake, health psychologist and Professor of Behavioural Medicine at the University of Nottingham. I'm delighted to be here today to talk to you about this work as an award winner of the HiddenREF 2024 Communicative Outputs. Globally, more than 7 million confirmed deaths from COVID-19 have been officially reported, but the true toll is likely to be far higher. When excess mortality is taken into account, researchers estimate that between 15 and 20 million people worldwide may have lost their lives during the pandemic. When the COVID-19 pandemic began, the focus of public health was, understandably, on infection control and the physical risks faced by healthcare workers. But very quickly, another critical challenge emerged: the psychological impact on those working at the front line. Healthcare professionals were suddenly dealing with relentless pressure, long shifts, rapidly changing protocols, a lack of resources and a constant fear of infection. Many were forced to make impossible ethical choices. often feeling guilt, helplessness, or moral injury. On top of that came isolation from friends and family, grief from patient and colleague losses, and the sheer exhaustion of working through an unfolding global crisis. History had already warned us. In earlier outbreaks, from SARS to H1N1, healthcare workers reported high levels of stress, anxiety, and even PTSD, sometimes persisting long after the crisis was over. COVID-19, with its scale and uncertainty, threatened to amplify those risks even further. At the time, I was part of a national research team conducting a study called ICON, looking at the impact of COVID-19 on nurses and midwives. This study involved 3 national surveys of nurses and midwives across the UK, one just before the COVID-19 peak, one during the first peak and one shortly afterwards. Thousands of staff responded, representing a wide range of roles, from students to experienced nurses and midwives. The surveys captured their experiences of workload, safety, training and psychological well-being. The results were striking. Many reported high levels of stress, anxiety, depression, and even symptoms consistent with PTSD. Concerns about personal safety and the risk to families were widespread, and many felt training and PPE provision were inadequate. Importantly, although face-to-face mental health support was available, very few staff actually accessed it. These surveys provided one of the clearest national pictures of how COVID-19 was affecting the nursing and midwifery workforce in real time. As a healthcare educator, I was also very mindful of the impact that the pandemic had on healthcare trainees and their support needs. We looked at the psychological impact of COVID on healthcare trainees, and you can find out more details in this published paper. We interviewed 42 trainees from 13 UK higher education institutions. They were from a range of professions including nursing, midwifery, medicine, ambulance services, pharmacy and the allied health professions. This research identified the negative impact of the pandemic on healthcare trainees' emotional well-being, inconsistent mental health promotions across disciplines and variable pastoral support. Trainees also noted disruptions to academic studies and placements, leading to reduced preparedness for future clinical practice. There were clear impacts of the pandemic on their mental well-being. In the early months of the pandemic, there were no dedicated digital tools to guide healthcare workers or their employers in protecting psychological well-being during COVID-19. Having seen that gap, I aimed to rapidly design and deliver a digital learning package, freely accessible and evidence-based, that could help healthcare workers and organisations understand the psychological risks of COVID-19, support each other and build resilience in the face of extraordinary pressure. You can read more about it in this paper. I brought in a researcher colleague, Fiona Birmingham, and we moved quickly to design the package. Richard Kish, a learning technologist from the university at the time, offered to help us with technical support. We aimed to develop an online package for health and care workers that provided support and signposting for psychological well-being. It was developed very rapidly within 3 weeks of pandemic outbreak in the UK. We adopted an agile 3-step approach that combined stakeholder input, peer review and rapid evaluation, ensuring the final product was both evidence-informed and directly relevant to those on the front line. The digital wellbeing package was developed using a rapid 3-step agile approach. First, we did public involvement activities. 97 stakeholders and healthcare staff were consulted to identify their needs and priorities. Second, content was drafted and refined through peer review with 10 experts to ensure the relevance and clarity of the content. Finally, the package was launched online and evaluated for usability, engagement and practical impact. This process allowed for iterative improvements based on this rapid, real-world feedback that we were getting. The digital learning package provided healthcare workers with practical, evidence-informed guidance to support their psychological well-being during COVID. It covers key areas such as self-care, strategies for managing stress, fatigue and anxiety, and coping with moral dilemmas. The package emphasises peer and team support, offering tools to foster psychologically safe communication and collaboration. Leadership guidance is included to help managers create supportive work environments and reduce stigma around mental health. Additionally, it contains signposting to mental health resources and further support services. The content is modular and flexible, allowing users to access sections that meet their immediate needs. and it's designed to be concise, practical, and directly applicable to the challenging circumstances that healthcare staff were facing during the pandemic. This digital package reached over 81,000 health and care workers worldwide. It was promoted by a range of professional organisations across the UK, including the British Psychological Society. During the pandemic, materials from it were included in leadership training delivered by the Royal College of Nursing, and it was included in a case example of best practice in our book published by Elsevier called Health and Wellbeing at Work for Nurses and Midwives. In an evaluation, we collected some information about how it had helped, and these are some examples of how people who access the package have used it. They applied their new knowledge to emotionally support colleagues and family members. They undertook training in psychological first aid, or PFA, to develop new skills. Some of them called a telephone helpline to access support for themselves, and they implemented advice around coping with their own emotions and also understanding the emotions of others. Many accessed other digital support that was signposted from within the package, such as sleep or mental health apps. Some organisations included the digital package within their COVID-19 staff health and wellbeing provisions, or the package was uploaded to internal educational resource portals for staff. The resource was embedded within healthcare trainee educational curricula in many university settings, and the resource was widely shared with professional bodies, colleagues, peers and family members. I would like to thank all the people who are involved in any aspect of this work, including the consultations, the peer reviews, evaluation, content and technical development. And of course, I'd really like to thank the HiddenREF team for recognising the value of this work as a non-traditional output, for its scale and scope in supporting the mental well-being of the health and care workforce during the pandemic. Many thanks.
Okie dokie, I did a really good job of chairing before and forgot to remind you guys that we will be using Slido for the Q&A. So let me head back to that slide so you can actually see it. Does this thing go back? It does. So it's the exact same one you were on earlier if you already have it open. When it comes to Holly, if you guys have any questions, pop them in there. We'll make sure to get them, and you know where I'm going to be posting anything, so you can keep chatting over on Slack, hopefully. Let's see how that goes. And not going to play it again. Excellent. Right, so we have that. Next up, we will be hearing from Lorraine Van Blerk, who was highly commended in 21 applications of research and the hidden role.
Thanks, Lindsay. Okay, it's great to be here and to be presenting on behalf of the winners. I didn't actually win, I just nominated some people to win. And I have co-authored this talk with two of that group of young people who were highly commended in the hidden role, Richie Lamptey and Ruben Ayamba, who are both from Ghana, and you'll hear from them during the talk as well. So some of the questions we were asked to talk to started with, why did you apply to the HiddenREF? Well, why did I apply for a group of 18 young homeless researchers to be celebrated through the HiddenREF? Well, first of all, the mission of the HiddenREF was really important, and the fact that it was looking to celebrate everyone involved in the creation of research. And I think for someone who works with children and youth, with young people, this is a real challenge that we face in our research. We do a lot of participation, even co-production of research with young people, and they're often celebrated in many ways, but they're not necessarily always acknowledged in the same way that academic researchers are. And the HiddenREF gave that opportunity for young people to go up against all of you from universities and show what they could do. They were the researchers in the project, and our challenge was to see that they were recognised for their work, and thank you to the HiddenREF for doing that. So the second question that we were asked was, well, what do you do? why did you win the award? So Growing Up on the Streets was a longitudinal qualitative co-produced research project with young people who were homeless, living on the streets of African cities. And it was in direct response to the question of what happens to children as they grow up on the streets, as they age and become adults. What happens in that period of youth? And it was particularly around, we were doing some work with the UN around having a general comment on children in street situations and looking at their rights. And this group were a group that were unacknowledged and not included in a lot of that work. So we worked with young people in Accra in Ghana, Bukavu in the DRC and Harare in Zimbabwe to explore issues around their life and what it meant as they grew up around health, shelter, food, work, livelihoods, violence, safety, resilience, lots of things that they had identified. And we worked with 6 young people in particular who became researchers in that project for 3 years in each of these cities. Their living conditions didn't change. They still lived on the streets, they still lived with their peers, and they undertook their own ethnographic research for a period of 3 years with a group of approximately 200 young people aged between 14 and 24. And this produced this big qualitative data set of approximately 2,500 ethnographic narrative reports. And I've put the link to, it's an open access data set on the UK Data Service, so it is freely available to use. And that was also highly commended in the applications of research. But these young people were researchers. They undertook research for 3 years, which probably not many academics can say that they've consistently undertaken 3 years of research. And Richie, one of my co-authors, is telling us here why it was important to do the research in the way that we did it.
See, there's a saying, no one can tell the story of another person. Are you getting me? So it is something that involves street connected people, so it will be wise if they do it themselves. Trust me, you have gotten experienced people, you have gotten PhD holders, suitable people for the work. Trust me, you have been good, but the content is low and to me compromise. But you give the people and those who are living the same life. So it was fluent. It was like telling something you do. We did it with no stress. We had to go to no one to get more information. We had to do it among ourselves. So it was good doing it ourselves. And it was very confidential. So there was nothing for us to be afraid of. And we did it perfectly. Thank you.
So, you know, this is why they deserve the award, because they did this amazing research themselves. And it wouldn't have been as good if I had done it with my PhD. So I also wanted to give you a tiny flavour of some of that data and to show you the experiences and lived experiences of what it is like to grow up on the streets. And these are just a sample of photographs from different locations. So, top left for you is young people in Harare cooking food together. Top right is young people in Bukavu collecting and recycling plastic to sell. Sarah, one of the researchers in this picture, I've got my directions mixed up, selling small sweets on the streets, and then others sleeping in one of the markets. And there's a few quotes on this slide that gives you a sense of the challenges and difficulties that young people face growing up on the streets. Richie and Ruben also thought it would be good to show you something from one of the story maps that they produced that I'll talk about later, but it's visually giving you an understanding of the research that they did.
These are places where some other peoples live. Everything they possess, they kept them here. They do their work here, they eat here, they sleep here, they do everything here. Basu. Good afternoon.
So that was a whistle stop to a few key examples of what it's like to grow up in the streets. But I want to tell you as well about some of the kind of amazing outcomes and outputs that have been produced by the young researchers that took part in this project. So this slide talks about influencing stakeholders for change. We did a lot of work. We had additional funding from ESRC to do additional knowledge exchange work. And we ran a number of workshops in each country and an African continental workshop where we brought stakeholders together to think about how can they better understand this group of young people and respect their rights on the streets. And so Josephine, one of the researchers, talks about how she saw this as an opportunity to lash out at people and say, you know, you treat us really badly. But then she thought about it a bit more, and having done some training, thought, well, actually, if I can more likely have a better outcome. Jonathan talks about how just telling the stories that they had collected through their ethnography was really crazy for him, because it shocked him that this enabled people to listen and to then respond. And so he highlights how they would do something positive. The other two examples on the slide come from stakeholders, a UNICEF stakeholder and a government stakeholder, talking about how engaging with the young researchers in this way has moved them on in thinking in terms of policy. And Ghana are currently implementing their action plan for working with street children. And the research that was undertaken here by these researchers fed directly into the UN General Comment on children in street situations. And in fact, it was the first general comment to actually quote young people, including these researchers. Co-authoring publications. This isn't something we had initially thought about, but actually, you know, why not? And again, thinking about creative ways to do this. So Richie, one of my co-authors in this talk, worked with us to write a book chapter over WhatsApp. Wasn't an easy task either, but we wrote a book chapter together, and that was published in 2025 in the book on the slide. Another way to expand the outcomes from the research. I mentioned story maps, and this was an idea that did not necessarily come from me or any of my research team, but actually Ruben, who also co-authored this talk at our continental workshop in Harare, was kind of shocked by the different situations of young people living on the streets, and particularly his colleagues in Bukavu and the experiences that they faced. And he said, we need to be able to tell our stories to a global audience. And he wanted to put it on the internet and to work out how to do this. So we learned how to use ArcGIS, which is like a software package for story maps. And then we found additional funding to produce story maps from the research. So these combine text, video, sound, photographs, and maps to enliven the findings with the aim of influencing policy and public audiences beyond the academy. And as one of the young researchers says, this story map will improve the image of street children. We're not as bad as you think. We might be living in harsh conditions, but we're trying to make a living. And so these story maps are really available, and I'll show you the links in a minute on the next slide, but just to say that they go beyond reaching to that global audience. They also can attach to stakeholder reports and help to bring those to life for stakeholders. And they also enable young people to directly feed into the academy. So we've written journal articles on producing these story maps. We've made podcasts for the conversation around how we explored COVID-19 through a story map. And there are three, one from each city. And they were produced, all the images, videos, texts, the curation, the kind of design was all produced by young people, and my colleague then put it into the story map format for them. And so the last question that I was asked to consider is, what does winning the HiddenREF mean? Well, I think it means different things for different people in 2001. For young people, I think it means that their work in research was recognised on an equal platform to adults, and not just the young people that we submitted, but I think that is something that we can include for all young people. For the HiddenREF committee, Gemma might be online, I'm not sure, but I love this quote from Gemma because she said that the entry moved the judges to tears, so we disrupted the disruptive HiddenREF, made them rethink the criteria for inclusion in the hidden roles category. Why does it have to just be those who are hidden in the academy? Let's go beyond that and look at all of those that have a key role to play in research. For us, it enabled us to come a little bit closer to inclusive research practices in the work that we do. But then what does it mean for the street youth researchers themselves? Well, they can tell you.
The time I received that award, and to be honest with you, I was happy and people started to see me in a different way, because friends of mine started to see me that the good work I've done with them, this is the award. I even showed them this award I even got from UK, and it gave me some small exposure for including my friends. Now the respect is there, and the moment even I go to some certain places and I hold that award, anytime my wife keeps seeing such award, the respect is keeping moving. Because oh, Ruby did this with these people over some years. So the moment I received the award, to be honest with you, it motivates me a lot. It's helped me so that I can know that, okay, I have to do more. So that people can say that, okay, being on the street doesn't mean that you cannot also do something for yourself. So that helped me that, okay, I'm doing, people are watching it out there. What I'm doing with my friends, people are also appreciating it. So the moment I received the award, I was happy, and I was also happy to be part of this research project.
To me, it meant a lot. Meant a lot. Coming to realize a boy from nowhere, boy from the street, ordinary people, giving a simple instruction, giving a simple training, and then we've come along to do what is expected of us. We did so much. We did what was tasked onto us. We give so much speech, and through that, we won the award from UK, and it was a lot. I did a lot with that. I was bluffing with my friends, telling them this is what I could do. This is what we did. This is what we've done. This is what this is the chance given to us, and this is what we've made out of it. So I spread it to so many people, letting them know what we've gone, like what we've won from the award, like from the research we did.
So this is the 18, well, there's 19 names on this slide, and I'll explain that in a minute. This is the 18 researchers. This is their pseudonyms. Obviously, Richie and Ruben are not using pseudonyms to co-author with me anymore, because this research was done 10 years ago, so they are grown up and have make that choice themselves. But this is the 18 researchers, and I just wanted to put their names on the slide. The pictures on the slide show Richie talking on a panel with academics from across the African continent and government minister. So, you know, just to show that being part of the research and winning awards like the HiddenREF can enable young people to do these things. Didier from the DRC was invited by the American Bar Association to go talk in Brazil. The slide on the bottom is Dofi with her shop in Accra. Brighton has a government job. Constance, Goodwill and Bonnie M have all passed. Constance just right at the end of the data collection, which is why Dofi became a researcher. Some are in prison, some are unknown in terms of their locations, others are still on the streets. So, you know, I just wanted you to know a little about these young people and how proud they were to win this award. And so thank you to the HiddenREF for being the competition it is. And also thank you to all of those involved in growing up in the streets. There's too many to name, so logos on the slide. Thank you.
Wow, fantastic. Were you wanting to do your photo thing now or at the end of the question? It's all right. You tell them the reason.
If you don't mind, we're going to put the light on and Pete's going to take a photograph so that I can send my co-authors to show all these amazing people that listened to them talking today, if you don't mind. So smile.
Lorraine.
No.
Yeah, you're not in it. Oh, okay. You sure?
Sure.
Okay. So, can everyone over there give me a wave?
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Lorraine. So we've got the slide open for some questions, and I have to say personally, sitting there, I wasn't expecting your last slide, which is slightly emotional, just thinking about all the people that you're working with and the fact that it's really hard for you to keep in touch with them or know what they're doing. And yeah, take my hat off to you for that. I suppose while we're waiting on people to bring questions in, I know that you very recently had a trip to Ghana, and I just wondered, of the people that you were able to see, were you able to find out much about the next steps, the things that they're working on?
So, I don't know, can I go back?
Yeah.
So, Daphne, as I said, had just opened the shop, and she was really proud of it, and she's able to take her mum to work there. Her mum's really not very well. Her mum was also homeless on the streets, and so they have somewhere to live now, and they have a shop. Constance, as I said, passed a number of years ago. Sarah, we don't know Sarah's whereabouts. Josephine had just had her 6th child, so she had a new baby girl. Eric and Jonathan are my co-authors. They don't mind, they know that their pseudonyms are no longer, they have chosen that. Eric is married with 2 children and sells second-hand clothing, and Jonathan has a shower block within the market in Kantamanto, and Papa is still on the streets.
I think that shows quite a lot about how much you care about all this, to actually just look at that list of people and know, thanks James, and know so much about what they're doing. I think that's really great. Can you guys see questions coming in the slide? Is my iPad just not being very kind to me?
I don't think, I think maybe it was because
Oh, hang on, yeah, true. Okay, hang on. No, we've got some coming in now. Let me just manage them. So you guys can see it. Okay, we do have one question that has come in. What would you like to have submitted to the REF that the framework stopped you doing?
That's a really good question. I mean, I suppose I didn't think about it, but we submitted the data set to the HiddenREF, but maybe we should have submitted it to the REF. But it was only made available in December 2020, so it was a timing issue as well. The knowledge exchange training pack that we developed for training young people actually formed an impact case study, so in some ways it did get submitted to the REF. But the story maps are also part of the work that the young people have done themselves, and it would have been, potentially that could have been a good thing to submit to the REF, but being a bit risk averse in a university that doesn't nobody really had much knowledge of NTOs and how to write them. Standard journal publications were the preferred format, shall I say.
As we all know, we're all here together to try and change that, aren't we? Make it much easier for these things to be assessed. Let me just read the one that's coming in. You talked of disrupting the disruptors. What else could a HiddenREF do to showcase more work like your own?
Oh, that's a really good question to be asked on the spot. I know. I suppose the going beyond the academy, it would be kind of nice to see a bit more of that. I know that there's been much more in this last HiddenREF. I was on one of the assessment panels, and there were definitely elements of not just universities and people working in universities coming through, but to think more about community involvement in research and impact, possibly.
Okay, they're flooding in now, Lorraine. We're going to have to, well, they're flooding in now, Lorraine, which is good news. So someone here has put simply, how on earth did you write a book chapter by WhatsApp? Is there an answer to that one?
With great difficulty. By sending chunks of text and ideas and receiving back chunks of text and comments and changes and that kind of thing. Interestingly, yeah, and with difficulty.
Keeping up to date with these, other people are now doing some moderation, which is great. Thank you for that. So someone is saying they hope this is the right place for this, so let's see what they're going to ask. They agree very powerful work and reporting. If you decide to extend the work to Burkina Faso, please let me know. I've done some research. Okay, this is very much a, yeah. Lindsay should have maybe read that before she actually read it out live. Okay, go for it. Yeah.
So we actually got ESRC secondary data analysis funding to do a reanalysis of parts of the data around resilience. And one of the things that we did do with that project, which has just got 6 months left to go, is involved academics in Uganda and South Africa to help analyse that data to translate messages beyond the 3 countries in this study and to look at a wider continental approach to how we support young people living on the streets. So if you're working in Burkina Faso and you'd like some of that information to share with governments and NGOs and those working with homeless young people, then look at our Growing Up on the Streets website and you will find all the tourist material there as well.
Perfect, very well done. So actually, we'll make sure you get these details because the person that submitted this question does want to speak to you about passing over literature and making some connections. So I think that'll be really important. I think so. We're out of time now. So thanks very much for the question. Thanks very much again for the talk. Like I say, I actually found that slightly emotional at the end. So thank you for that one. So maybe one last applause for Lorraine.
And Richie and Ruben and all of those on the slide, the winners.
Yeah, very true. She's modest till the end. Wasn't me, it was them. But yeah, you've enabled for us to learn about it with it, which I think is huge as well. Right, go through a couple of slides. Okay, now we are on to Laura Henderson, winner of the Hidden Role in the 2024 competition as Research Development Manager. This one. Okay.
So, hi, I'm Laura, and alongside Jenny Adams, who is an Open Research Manager at the University of Sheffield, I am joint winner of the Hidden Role category as part of last year's HiddenREF competition. My job title is Research Development Manager, and I do that at Royal Brompton and Harefield Hospitals in London, and we're part of Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Foundation Trust. And I've just listed here some of my responsibilities or accountabilities within my role. So the mainstay of my job, excuse me, is to support researchers developing research fellowships and research grants to external funders. I'm also accountable for research communications and patient and public involvement in research. My team run a number of events. We've got a showcase coming up next month for, it's a bit of a long acronym. It's called NMAPS. We try to not use non-medics, but it includes nurses, midwives, allied health professionals, healthcare scientists, pharmacists and physios within our hospitals who have led or significantly contributed to a research project over the last 12 months. And it sort of gives them a platform to present their involvement in that research. I line manage a small team of 2. I teach on a number of courses that are run by our academic health science centre partner. I manage the contracting process when award has been won, and I am responsible for designing and implementing processes that my team have to follow. So one of the accountabilities or responsibilities that were on the previous slide, I'm just going to go through in more detail because this is the reason behind my nomination, and that's fellowships. And I just wanted to explain a little bit more about the support that I offer on fellowships, partly because the reason behind my nomination was that my nominators would like my role or a role like mine to be more widespread and mainstream across research active organisations. So at the start of the journey, I guess, with a researcher, I'll send out an alert whenever a funding call has been announced. I'll send out an alert that's bespoke, but it's got all the pertinent information in there. It's got the deadline and how they can access me. If there is a webinar, if it's a new call, or if there's been substantial changes to that call from the previous round, I'll attend a webinar just so I've got the most up-to-date information whenever I'm working with a researcher on a fellowship. And then we'll have an initial meeting and schedule a number of meetings up until their fellowship deadline. So the things that we work on together initially is remit. So is your application and your research in remit for this call? Are you eligible to apply for this fellowship in terms of your career stage and your background? Do we have enough time to work up a competitive application? You do need a long workup. It's very clear when you see an application that's been put together in 1 week versus one that's had months of work, and you need that time to redraft and refine your application and have supervisors and mentors input into it to make it high quality. What is your writing style like? Researchers, certainly that I work with anyway, I think they approach a grant or a fellowship like they do a publication, and it's a very different writing style that you need for a grant. You need a more persuasive writing style, and there's a number of techniques that you can use. So we work on that. I will look at the evaluation criteria that the funder uses to score the fellowship, because ultimately it's a numbers game, and they have to score a certain amount to be within that sort of funding window. And finally, I look at the chair's report from the previous round, or even multiple previous rounds, because generally there's trends and patterns that the chair reports. This is what makes a successful fellowship. This is what we've seen in all of the fellowships we funded in the last round. This is what we definitely do not want to see. In terms then of the support that I offer to the fellow, I'll coordinate resources if they've got a partner organisation with the university, if they're involving departments or boards or clinics in our hospitals. I'll make sure that they're linked into everybody that they need to be linked into. I'll help them with their budget. So with fellowships, normally you have caps on different sort of budget categories. Your salary is whatever it is, but you'd have a funding cap on your training and development plan, potentially on your patient and public involvement. So it's just making sure that their budget is accurate. It has everything in there that it's supposed to have in there, but it's also within the cap that they're allowed to spend. And then in turn sort of help them with the SOCAT that relates to the project that they're submitting. The training and development plan is really down to them to put together, but I can guide them on what training they should have in their training and development plan based on, again, their career stage and their research area of interest. One of my team, she is the PPI lead for research, so I'll signpost to her for both the PPI budget. It's now called Working with People and Communities, actually, with NIHR anyway, and she'll help them with a whole PPI plan. I'll review the lay summary, review and edit the lay summary. I write the host statements for our head of department, just so I can make sure it has all the information in there that the funder expects to see, and I will coordinate the host statement from the university partner. Normally, when I'm working, well, on some cases when I'm working with a fellow, it's their first crack at the whip really with an application. They've never accessed these online platforms before, so I will help them navigate the platform that they have to submit their fellowship on, and just, you know, work out what goes where. And then finally, I'll manage their approval. So normally, fellowships need sign off by a head of department, finance. So I'll just make sure that those people know in advance that this application is going in and that they will be required to sign it off. So across all of those sort of different elements of support, there's 4 categories that are covered, and we keep coming back to those four categories as the application is developing. So the first is remit. You know, does this meet the remit of the funder? The next is budget. Are you asking for all you're allowed to ask for? If you're doing a full-time fellowship, you might be allowed, let's say, $5,000 for your training and development plan. If you're doing a part-time fellowship, that might be prorated, so you're only allowed $2,500. Is it compliant? Have you given the funder what they expect to see, when they expect to see it? So I will literally just have the guidelines and their application form, and making sure that they're putting everything, they're answering the question the way the funder wants that question answered. And then finally, just making sure it's high quality. Is this likely to be competitive? Have you written well? Does your Gantt chart match your budget, match your justification of resources? Have you involved, you know, the people that a funding panel would expect you to have involved? So once the application goes in, then we wait for an outcome. If they're lucky enough to get invited to an interview, I will set up a mock interview panel, and we will run that just as if they were going to the funder. So they'll have to start the interview with their 5-minute presentation, and we'll do a formal interview. And then after that, I will provide feedback. You know, this was the question, this was how you responded to it, this is what the panel thought of your response, whether it was negative or positive. If it was negative, these are the ways that you can improve that response. If they've been given feedback, particularly if it's a rejection, I will restructure that. Whenever you get an email about a fellowship, normally it's listed by reviewer. And if it's a rejection especially, all someone sees is reviewer 2 hates me. But actually, if you pick out the components, so the components are normally the applicant, sites and support, and training and development. If you look at all of those together, rather than the reviewer comments, you can start to see themes that each reviewer actually had a concern about, and it just puts it in a little bit more context. If they have a conditional offer, so their offer is contingent to them doing something, I'll help them prepare that extra piece of work that they need to submit in order to get an unconditional offer, or any sort of form of rebuttal that they might need to make. And then I manage the contracting process. So once the contract comes in, normally it's a standard template. There's not really much to negotiate on that. But so my role there is really just making sure that the finances line up with what we've applied for. And then finally, I've put an acronym here which you won't understand outside of our organisation, but this is a post-award finance meeting. And basically that involves me with the fellow, with our finance department, and with someone from our facilitation team who take on the project. You know, they set it up, they take it through ethics and HRA. So we all get together and discuss the contract, any sort of contractual obligations, regulatory obligations. We go through the budget. we talk about different agreements that are required with all of those partner organisations to make sure that they're instigated in time. So I wanted to highlight who made my nomination. So it was two people that I work with. One is Dr. Samantha Irvine. She is Chief Paediatric Respiratory Research Physiologist and Associate Director for Professions Allied to Healthcare at it's King's College Clinical Academic Training Office. That's what KCATO stands for. And KHP is King's Health Partners, which is one of our 2 partner academic health science centres. And I've worked with Sam on a number of her fellowship applications over probably the last 10 years. She's now on an, I don't know if it's familiar to people in this room, but she's on an NIHR Senior Clinical Practitioner Research Award. It's one of NIHR's new sort of postdoc awards. My other nominator was Dr. Vicky Slonims. She's Senior Consultant Speech and Language Therapist and lead for AHP research at Evelina Children's Hospital in London. I haven't worked with Vicky directly, but I've supported some members of her team. So whenever Sam and Vicky contacted me, I think it was round about last summer, to ask me if I give my permission for them to put in a nomination, which is a requirement, I believe, of HiddenREF. I was like, yeah, please, go ahead. I didn't really think anything of it, and then I attended the ceremony and was announced joint winner, which was amazing. Then I wanted to know what they actually had put in that nomination. I didn't, up until that point, it really hadn't sort of registered with me. But I was like, wow, they must have had said some powerful stuff in there. So this is just a little snapshot, and obviously central to what the HiddenREF is trying to achieve. If I just sort of take a bit out of that, her name only appears on our application forms as research support participant. It's such a weak title for someone so important to the process. Recognition from the HiddenREF project would not only demonstrate how much we value her personally, but we hope demonstrate to our NHS Trust and university partners the importance of her work, and maybe even allow other centres to adopt this model of working. And I think that's really important point, that this role doesn't exist normally in research active organisations, or certainly not a lot that we've partnered with. And it is a really key role to getting funding through and getting people on clinical academic pathways. So they went on to say then we can focus on growing our careers as researchers without the sleepless nights over whether we did our application correctly or fully explored the funder remit. Her support is absolutely key, and at the moment completely hidden. So that was obviously some very lovely words. So what winning the category has meant for me is that it has made me feel seen. You know, we're all on a treadmill of life, personally and professionally, and certainly in my job, it's one fellowship is out and then the next one's in. People are very gracious. You know, they always acknowledge your input, but I think receiving this award, the nomination, and then actually winning the category just took that to another level for me. So the impact, so I was awarded, it was last November, so it's not even a year ago, and then my organisation published a news story basically about the award, about the HiddenREF and the award, and immediately I started getting more requests from researchers in our hospitals, which was lovely but quite overwhelming, just who wanted support then with their own grants and fellowships. So this time last year we were a team of 2. It was myself and my colleague Sarah Aiden, who's amazing, and I've worked with her for a long time. But earlier this year we took someone else on board, so we're now a team of 3, just because of capacity issues. And another organisation reached out to me recently, another NHS, to go and set up a grant service there. Their researchers don't apply for grants or fellowships. They put them all through the university, and they want to bring that work and funding into the NHS. So later this month, actually, I'm about to start a 6-month secondment with another NHS. So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to the HiddenREF. You know, this has given me opportunities that wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for this award. And yeah, that's it.
Thanks very much, Laura. So I'm kind of glad that we kept you in suspense right until the end, and I kind of want to look back at the video now of you winning and see the reaction.
Please don't. It's so embarrassing.
I assumed that you looked like I was there, but I have forgotten. And I just wanted to apologise for the extra work that it seems to have brought your way.
It's all good. It's all good. We've been able to onboard someone else, so it's not like we're overwhelmed. We've my employer. Thankfully, my employer thankfully seen that there was a greater need. So the team's got bigger, and I think it's going to expand again, actually.
Fantastic. Who was it you're employed by again? No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I'm glad they did that. Other people could take a leaf out of their book, couldn't they?
Yeah.
We've had some questions come in, right? So first one we have here, how do you build up your expertise in what funders want? And do you find that changes over time?
Yeah, I mean, it's literally about attending any sort of training session that you can, any webinars. There's a brilliant program that runs every year. It's delivered by NIHR. I'm name dropping them a lot because we submit a lot of grants and fellowships to NIHR, and they are our biggest funder. But they run an essentials of grant writing. It's a 3-day course. It covers absolutely everything that you need to know. It covers those sort of the writing styles that I talked about. It covers patient and public involvement, equality, diversity, inclusion, supervisors, absolutely everything you can think of. It's free, it's online, so you can sort of tap in and out of it. So it's just accessing resources that are out there. When a call is launched, read through the guidance. You'd be surprised how many people don't read through the guidance, and they're shooting themselves in the foot before they even submit their application because it's not compliant, and you won't, you will not get it through all the way if you're not compliant. So yeah, it's just being aware of what's available on the internet and attending training courses and sessions whenever you can.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that. So we have about half a minute left, so I'm going to squeeze in the last question here, and it maybe is a bigger one that will take a bit more time, but we have, what are the main barriers to there being more research development managers at your institution and then generally across the sector?
So I was just speaking to some people who are here at lunch. We merged with Guy's and St Thomas's in 2021, and we are now 4 different clinical groups within Guy's and St Thomas's. So I work for a heart-lung critical care clinical group. There's a paediatric clinical group, a cancer, an oncology one, and I actually forget, I think it's, I actually forget what the other one is, sorry. But the only clinical group that has a role like mine is heart-lung critical care, and that's because I was there before we merged. We're starting to integrate services, and my role is definitely not at risk. They want to grow my role, and they're trying to add people to my role that might be able to support the additional clinical groups within our NHS Foundation Trust. Everybody I speak to says this is a really fantastic role, but I don't really know what the barriers are and why they don't emulate it. I think the fact that I'm taking a secondment to start the process with another NHS organisation who don't even submit grants through their own organisation is a massive step forward, and I hope that will just cascade.
Nodding my head at that bit, and I've seen other people nodding along as well. So hopefully you're right. You're off the hook. Very well done. I thank you for 3 competition winners that we had up here, and we'll give them a collective round of applause. And hopefully some of these talks have inspired you guys to submit to our competition and get involved in future as well. I don't think we've actually told you about that one yet, so spoiler alert. You did? Yeah, that's what I meant. I was like, did I miss that? No. Right, so what are we doing next? I'm going to have to read this because I've no idea what we're doing next. Thanks, everyone. So we're actually going to press the clicker. Yeah, I wasn't going to tell them about that. No, we're actually going to go and get you guys to smile for a photo. So before you can get your tea or coffee, if you basically follow the crowd, we've got people at the front that are going to send you down to the ground floor. The photographer's going to tell you to smile and wave your hands. So do all that good stuff. Then we're heading to the event suite where you've got a half hour to have your tea and coffee and chat break. Then we are back in here for the Affecting Change panel, which is that thing that is on the screen that's got a longer title. So, yeah, follow the crowd, please.
Okay, we're going to make a start. We've reached the final session of the HiddenREF Festival. Well, this to me reminds me of being in Panto or something, so I thought you might all go, oh. Anyway, thank you. Sad as it might be, we end with a wonderful panel who will be giving us insights into changes and perhaps hope for changes in how excellence is being rewarded, careers are being recognised, and how outputs are being evaluated, using their different perspectives from communities, different institutions, and their personal perspective to address these kind of themes. So in order then we'll have Kalpana Shankar from University College Dublin, Tim Newton from King's College London, Charlotte Brady from University of Edinburgh, and Samantha Ahern from University College London. Each will give a short provocation, no more than 10 minutes. We'll follow that with a panel discussion. Please, please, please use the Slido to put in your questions, prompts, thoughts, provocations to the panel, and we'll use that to guide our conversation until roughly 5 o'clock, when we'll draw the festival to a close and then let you all leave for your trains. So, I mean, you can leave beforehand if you have trains to catch before then, but you know what I mean. So, let's get going with Kalpana.
Thanks very much for that introduction, James. So the brief that I got was slightly different, which was Lindsay said, talk about whatever you feel like talking about. So first of all, thank you all for giving me the opportunity. I am at University College Dublin, as James said, and in Ireland we do not have any kind of research exercise. So why am I here? Well, I've gotten a chance to I've been invited to be a judge, or evaluator, I should say, for HiddenREF for both of its competitions. And I think I chaired the panel, one of the panels last time. So yeah, I keep turning up like a bad penny. I think it's Gemma's fault. So we were asked to introduce ourselves briefly, current work, and I'm going to talk about what's been keeping me up at night and what the implications are for research evaluation and culture, not just REF, but HiddenREF and otherwise. So, I'm a professor of research policy and practice at University College Dublin. I'm actually in the School of Information and Communication Studies, so I do a lot of work on information infrastructures, research management, data sharing, and the like, open science. Put in a plug for my current project, but didn't put in the QR code, Open Research and Health. We're looking at public-private partnerships and open science. But I also do a lot of work on equity, diversity, inclusion, and how that shape policy and practice. And a little bit about my own path and how it's shaped these interests. My accent would suggest that I'm not Irish. I've been at University College Dublin for about 14 years, came from the US. So I actually am studied librarianship and then ended up in informatics, and now I'm in a School of Information and Communication. And kind of had to go where the funding has been, where the jobs are, like we all do. And I feel like that's an important consideration when we start talking about roles, hidden or otherwise, in research, that it's not the smooth sailing. So all of these things have kind of gotten me interested over the last couple decades of my career on what has turned into a state of perma-crisis in or polycrisis in higher education and academia. I think you all in the UK are no stranger to this: uncertain finances, closures of programs, collective just trauma of burnout, concerns about our relevance or irrelevance. I just saw a headline today that some senior person in your government has said that they're going to be closing off programs or reducing the number of students and opening more apprenticeships. We'll see if that is really the case. All of these topics, I think, resonate to some degree with all of us and some of us. And then there's the global research ecosystem, which seems to be particularly in peril, and the U.S. government's, I would say, outsized role in shaping one of our current polycrises. So the questions that have been keeping me up at night are: how are researchers navigating this state of permacrisis, and what's the lived experience of their research? And how do they think about their own career trajectories, topic choices, networks? Tim and I, we were talking about students at his university asking that their transcripts be changed so that words like equity, diversity, and inclusion are removed for any modules they might have taken because they're American students or maybe want to work in the US. So how are we, and not just researchers, all of us, how are we thinking about this? But of course, how are our collective systems evaluating what counts? And how do we understand these issues in real time? And how do we document these collective experiences? Some of the things I'm wondering are we going to see new HiddenREF roles? Are we going to see the demise of some existing roles because they are no longer, are surplus to requirements? They're not fit, fit for whatever the future holds. If we're cutting back on the number of students, what research is going to count and be counted and be funded? Sitting as I am in Ireland and the EU, I find myself thinking that the next rounds of research funding beyond Horizon Europe are going to be focusing much, much more on research securitization, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, because we've got this global, quote, arms race in scare quotes with respect to research. Are we going to see a continuing diminishment of the arts, humanities, and social sciences, of course, to all of our detriments? And I want to know, where are the resistances that we all collectively need to pay attention to? How are people resisting? How are people still doing the work they want to do, supporting the research they want to do, given all of these issues? We're also seeing that money follows crisis, or opportunity. Somebody always gets to benefit from a crisis. Just learned about a new unit, a U.S. university, some high flyers have opened up essentially a branch on our campus to very little discussion and staff. The university president seems to have signed a check saying, all right, you guys are getting deals on overheads. U.S. Irish government's putting funding into this. They're taking up resources that potentially could go to the rest of us. Are we going to be seeing more of that? These global talent programs, who are they really meant to attract? Not those whose research is most imperiled or those whose identities and bodies are most imperiled, I don't think. So I think there's a lot of questions we all have to ask. And that's all. I'm kind of leave it there, even though that's probably shorter than what James wanted. And I should mention this background. I told Lindsay, one of the things that I've gotten very interested in the span of the last really 2 months has been printing. I've been doing printing on gel plates. I bought a small 3D printed press and had another little tiny press made from our campus 3D printing. And I'm beginning to think about how I could use printing and book arts, which I've been interested in bookmaking, to help people get over their blocks with their writing, think through their own research and teaching careers, where their own, pain points have been, where their, what is going on with their work and how can they document it outside of publications. And this particular background is a photograph of one of the first gel plate prints that I made. So I guess it's a non-traditional output, isn't it? Yeah. But anyway, I wanted the opportunity to use it. But thank you.
you, that's amazing. So just very quickly, Lindsay didn't say to me, talk about whatever you want. My reputation obviously goes before me. So first of all, thank you very much for what's been a really interesting couple of days. Fascinating, learnt a lot. And I should also say that I'm not here in my own right. I am here as our Dean of Research, REF, KEF and Impact. Unfortunately couldn't make it, but she sent me, so but anything I say is entirely down to me, nothing to do with Maddie. At King's we're very committed to the idea of the HiddenREF. Maddie and I are very keen to make our commitment to the 5%, but as someone mentioned earlier, it's a very risk-averse community out there. And there's a pragmatic thing that says, are we confident enough in making assessments of non-traditionally returned outputs that we would be confident to take that risk and submit them? And that kind of brings me to a number of things. In my life, what I should say is I'm Dean of Research Culture at King's College London, and as that I have academic oversight of culture, ethics, governance and integrity. And a very key moment in my life, I mean our lives are made up of key moments, turning points where decisions happen, so you meet people and life changes forever. One of the key moments for me was during my PhD, I blew the whistle on my PhD supervisor, which meant that I couldn't get a job for 10 years in the area that I was doing my PhD in. It turned out okay, but I could have not done that. And I have heard some of our postgraduate students who won't call things out because they're making a pragmatic decision to get things done. And we often have this conflict between what is pragmatic and what appeals to our sense of values. And I will, unfortunately, as you can tell, having lost 10 years of my career, I'm very value-driven. But I do appreciate sometimes we need to be pragmatic. And as I've got older, I've learned to balance those two things. I want to talk to you anyway about two things. What I think are core values of culture, some core themes about culture and how that relates, certainly at KCL, and how that relates to assessment. How we try and change that in different ways. How do we fund change? Because that's important. We can't do much without funding. And then I'm going to give you the answer to how all this relates to the REF people, culture and environment. I'll leave about 30, 40 seconds for that bit. So our core values at KCL, Research Culture, we start with inclusivity. And inclusivity is such a broad definition for us. It's about inclusivity of people, roles, outputs, contribution, and so on. And one of the key things which I reiterate a lot is that we value other people's inputs and outputs, not by making them more similar to something we already value. So there's an interesting bit under the Sottle talk that was pre-recorded, where she says, I'm doing engagement, I'm doing this, and they say, it doesn't really sound like research. And then as soon as they start to think it's research, then they start to value it. But actually, it should be valued in its own right, and we should be valuing roles and people, and outputs and inputs in their own right. Fairness, and of course that relates very closely to fairness. If we are inclusive, we are fair, and it relates to respect and, of course, collegiality. And Kalpana very kindly reminded us of the threats that we're facing. And one of the things I've noticed, thank you, it's a bit depressing though, it's just the truth. One of the things I'm minded of is that under any organisation, when it becomes under stress, usually financial stress, what tends to go is the things that are nice. And that often is collegiality, the culture and so on. And yet, those are very important parts of our core values. We see it in the NHS, and we've seen it, we're starting to see it in higher education. during COVID, sorry, this is why they didn't say talk about anything you want to. During COVID, my job, because I'm a psychologist, I got the role of overseeing our. So they wrote to me and said, "Can you oversee psychological services for patients and carers?" So we started setting up stuff, and we quickly noticed that there was a need for staff support, as outlined in one of the very excellent winners. And so we started organising that. And what Julia, I was going into London every day. I had all the kind of worries about going in and organising all this stuff and helping people and seeing people die. And I was at the hospital where a very famous member of Parliament was a patient, and all kinds of stuff going on. And in the middle of it, it was time for my PDR, and my line manager, who met me on a Teams meeting from his garden, asked me two questions. He said, "It's COVID and we're very, very busy, so I just want to know two things. What have you published this year, and what funding have you got?" Interesting, isn't it? Under times of stress, the system focuses on its perceived importance. And I was thinking, I've coordinated housing and food and water and a whole bunch of stuff for staff, and got iPads so that people can talk to their loved ones at home. And anyway, so we have three core themes. Based on those values, don't get me on COVID, based on those values, we have three core themes. The first thing is valuing diverse contributions, which of course speaks directly to the work that you're all doing so magnificently here. And of course, again, it relates to that inclusivity of roles, people, inputs, outputs. And we have in part of that, which is course related, is a thriving community. How do we support people to be recognised and rewarded and to achieve their valued goals insofar as they are compatible with the goals of the organisation? And the third one is good research practice. And the sharing of your outputs in all forms is good research practice, because that's how knowledge gets exchanged, that's how knowledge gets shared. And within, oh, blimey. Right, within that is global knowledge equity. The idea that can we make sure that our knowledge and information and outputs and so on is shared with everybody and equally shared, available to everyone in the world who can benefit from it. We work at 4 levels. Change the system. So can we work to create the system? Can we change REF? Can we change the funding systems? And that will then drive change at the institutions for those who are very pragmatic. And so, for example, at the institution level, we've changed our appointment and promotions, procedures and policies in order to gain broader recognition of different kinds of outputs and different kinds of activities. In terms of system change, we're looking at, can we get research technical professionals to have a standard career pathway across the United Kingdom with identified progression, that you can proceed in post just as an academic like me can? Can we change those systems to drive institutional change? And then we can look at community. So, for example, we've just done a piece of work, beautiful piece of work. We changed these policies and processes. We thought we were great. We widely disseminated them. We did training. I did a video, me on video. Can you imagine? I had to stick to a script. It was terrible. And then we followed up with looking at communities to see what is actually done. Guess what? They're all doing what they used to do. So there's more intervention needs to be done at the individual. And leave the individual to last, because we often think that behaviour change is the responsibility for the individual. But if we can change the structures that the individual exists within, we can drive behaviour change. How do we fund it? Well, our Scottish colleague, we, of course, at Research England got funding, which we used to have a central team that look at that institutional level, changing policy procedures, etc. We gave 75% of our funding to faculties for them to create change in their priorities at the community level. We've also had some grant funding, and I'm delighted to be part of the Open Research Project, hello Neil, which I think feeds into that thing about good research practice, about rewarding and recognising different contributions to research. It's a fantastic research project. I could talk about that for ages. We had the Welcome Project, and ours is looking at equality and diversity and inclusion, and how do we create a pipeline that is more favourable to people from traditionally under-recognised groups. And one of the things there is, which I like to think is what was really good about our Welcome Project, is we said that the problem is the system. We're going to put in place some mitigation which works with individuals, but the system needs to change. Very, very quickly. So I committed to said we're going to have a 5-year plan. The Vice Chancellor is going to sign up to that 5-year plan. We're going to have targets and everything. And he said, Tim, what kind of targets are these? And I said, how do you mean? He said, are they targets that if we fail, I get sacked, or ones where you get sacked? So it turns out they're the ones where I get sacked, and we have a good practice exchange. What's the relationship to people, culture, and environment? I have no idea. But I do know that we should be creating change beyond the requirements of REF. We need to do what is right and good, not what is necessarily pragmatic for REF. Thank you very much.
Okay. So, that's progress. Hi. I'm Charlotte Brady, and I am the head of REF, Research, Planning and Performance at the University of Edinburgh. And I am all REF and no outputs. So if this is a place where you need to boo, this is the time to boo. That's okay. I have 2 outputs with my name on them for my PhD, and it was very traumatic, and I don't ever want to have to go back to that. So yeah, I am all REF. I was a project manager in REF 2021, and then obviously the project got extended because of a pandemic. I used to be a policy officer, and that's when Brexit happened. So basically, I am a curse on the world. Sorry. My job, yes, is to deliver REF. So I'm looking at this from a very practical lens, but also a responsible one, because I've lived through REF 2021. I know how it broke people. And even if I needed that lesson, that's not something I want to deliver. So part of my job is making sure that things like the code of practice that has to be written, which describes how we make decisions, links up with our COARA commitments about how we do responsible research assessment. And I've got some stats here about the University of Edinburgh. In REF 2021, we submitted 28 units of assessment. 103 were non-traditional outputs, but also 7,173 were traditional. So we came in at less than 1.5%. I took this job in May last year, so I can no longer say I'm new at it. And I came into it going, nothing's happened since I left in 2021. Who was meant to be picking this up? I was scanning things like the FRAP, the Future Research Assessment Programme, and things that were going to change. And no one was really talking about this. We were going to be submitting wider types of outputs or anything like that. So one of the first things I did was set up a working group in the university to try and find out what the challenges were, what the barriers, and hopefully some solutions. So my diverse research outputs working group has had a couple of names. People don't like non-traditional outputs because it others them. So there's been some name changes as we go along. It brought together both academics and professional services, people who were involved in previous panels in assessing outputs, people who were involved in the submission this time, people who run our research information system, people like that. The plan was, semester 1 last year, we were going to cover all the challenges, the barriers, and then the contributions to knowledge and understanding module was going to come out around Christmas time, and then we were going to work on all the solutions to all these problems based on the publication, and that publication did not materialize for a while. So we're still stuck on the barriers and the challenges, if I'm honest. We know submitting outputs of diverse research types is encouraged, but we're really risk averse. We're really risk averse when there were financial consequences. So the best we can do is sort of kind of socialize the change, take the approach of starting conversations much earlier, having the opportunity to voice those fears and anxieties, But also at the end of Ref 21, one of our professors did a study that showed that there was no problem submitting diverse research output types in, I think it was in Unit 32, which is Art and Design. There's no statistical change between diverse research output types and traditional research output types. So if we keep coming back to that, if there isn't a barrier at assessment, then there shouldn't be a barrier at submission. We're running a pilot exercise right now. We are uncovering a lot of anxiety, but that's fair. Ooh, there's another button. Okay, there's a side button as well. There's 2 units in our pilot, Unit 23, which is Education, and 26, which is Modern Languages and Linguistics. One of the things we have found is our own research information system does limit us in identifying these diverse research output types. It's not easy to put them in there. Some of our output types change as they mature. So something might be an exhibition at one point or an artifact, and then it becomes something else by the end of the REF period. And so that's very hard. But as well as my kind of very policy-based diverse research outputs working group, someone in the university has set up another diverse research outputs working group to look specifically at the practicalities of our system. So it's helpful, but not helpful to talk about it. One of the things we did actually find was our academics don't necessarily recognize their outputs as research, but actually here REF helps because they have that criteria of what they identify as research. They do have criteria of originality, significance, and research, and what's the other one? Rigor. Thank you, I knew it was an R. And so if you can articulate it in those, people build confidence and go, oh, of course it's a research output then. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about one of the challenges that I've been working with right now as I'm writing our code of practice, still very much in draft. But the REF rules say that institutions must ensure that the equality impact assessment considers how outputs in British Sign Language and Welsh are not treated less favourably than those in English, in line with the legal statuses of these official languages. But when a deaf researcher makes an output, if it's written, then it's probably in English. But if it's in their first language, then it isn't written. It will be probably a video. It will be a digital piece. So, I'm writing code of practice. I think this is how it should influence decision making. I'm sorry, I'm going to read from the slide. So this is a piece in my code of practice that I've written to try and address this. Where research outputs are created first in a UK language other than English, for example, BSL, and are then translated into English, units are recommended to give priority to the output in the original language as a REF-eligible research output. Alongside these specific languages, where a language is relevant to the research produced, the research output in that language should be prioritised for review and selection for submission, rather than a translation into English. There are no barriers at panel to submitting outputs in languages other than English. So that, in theory, should make it easier for my BSL speakers to submit their outputs as they want to submit them. But translations is also a perfectly valid diverse research output type. Has what I have written going to start limiting that? I do not know. But the equality impact assessment will hopefully tell us as we go along. We'll be able to say, is it working? Is it not working? Do I need to adjust my policy? I think that's me.
Yeah, I'm a little bit smaller. So actually I have outputs, but I'm on the wrong contract. So even if they were case study worthy, then actually they can't be included. Although that is changing, so that's good. So I have multiple hats. I am a trustee of the Society of Research Software Engineering. I'm also based at UCL Centre for Advanced Research Computing. And those two things intersect quite a bit, and I'll explain why. So for those of you that don't know, Society of Research Software Engineering is founded on the belief that a world which relies on software must recognise the people who develop it. Very similar to this idea of, everyone in the research space should also be recognised. And it's about this rich environment that recognises the vital role of software in research, that we want to increase the software skills, promote collaboration and software expertise, and the academic career path for research software engineers. And actually this last bit is kind of where I come in. I am not a research software engineer. I am an aligned profession. As of last week, I think I'm officially a senior PRISM. But my role is very much teaching and learning. So I want to give you a little bit about the UCL context. So I come from our Centre of Advanced Research Computing, and we are probably the largest, by far, digital research technically professional unit around. If I tell you that we have around circa 60 research software engineers, about another at least 10 data scientists, plus a team of data stewards, plus the infrastructure engineers, the community team, the research, so the finance and the research support team, and then there's the digital research education piece, which is where I sit in. So it's a team of over 100 people that sit in this space that are all on permanent contracts, an awful lot of postdocs. I work with a lot of recovering postdocs, shall we say, and that it gives us this, okay? And it's about this application of data software and compute-intensive methods for research and innovation. And my job is in enabling this cutting-edge digital research capability in staff and students. So, not a big deal. I'm jointly responsible for just upskilling the entire institution on how to do cool, cutting-edge digital research, but also around the fair bit and other stuff. So, I'm a computer scientist. I know way too much. I care way too much probably about Gen AI. So I've been spending a lot of time talking about what it is, what it means for research integrity, how maybe if you actually look at the definitions of research integrity, you might kind of find that Gen AI kind of breaks most of those when you look at it deeply. And I was even talking to our undergraduate students about what research integrity and integrity in general actually is in a meaningful way. And I've been doing training around FAIR and that kind of thing, getting that recognised for people because, we all believe that FAIRs are great things to do, but most PIs won't give their people the time to do it because they don't get it. But if we show them the impact of FAIR, then actually they do get it, and then that actually becomes a refable output because those things are high profile and have that stuff. So I'm in quite a privileged context for the type of work that I am and that I do. And a lot of people have research in their title, and actually it came up, oddly enough, in a meeting yesterday that we started to talk about the REF and the volume metric and what our percentage of outputs would be and how we were going to start to identify that. So, and this is kind of where it intersects with my Society of RSE stuff because we're actually signatories of COARA, which is the Coalition for Advancing Research Assessment. And it's about recognising those diverse contributions to research. Well, I'm in a team that does all of that because that's what we do. There's base research assessment, primarily on qualitative evaluation. We want to abandon the inappropriate uses of journal and metric-based evaluation. Great, fine. And avoid the use of rankings of research organising and research and assessment. So why would the Society for Research of Engineering care about COARA and the REF? Well, okay. Well, if you look about the outputs, there's an awful lot of stuff in there, software and code, data sets and so on, that are exactly what we do all the time, our bread and butter business, and that we're PIs and co-Is on grants for. So immediately, we're in the diverse outputs. We also do some of the original type stuff. I've just co-authored one book chapter. I'm in the middle of writing another, and it's teachy-learny stuff. So even then, I think I'm looking a bit dodgy, REF-wise, right? Education not great well represented around the scholarship of teaching and learning, and that's what I do. This isn't who's refable, this is kind of the volume metric, and this is the slide that I changed. But what is interesting is that actually the professional services roles, the contracts that we are on, are going to be in the mix for the people who can create the outputs. What bothers me is that at the moment, and in my institution we're great, we actually have those career pathways. For each profession that we have a career pathway from junior through to principal. So in our case, grades 6 through to 9. And none of that is based on our research output. It's based on how well we do our jobs. Okay? I'm one of the people co-authoring the COARA action plan for the society, and that there's work in their plans around how do we encourage FAIR. Yes, I'm working on projects around career pathways, but one thing that I started to worry about is how do we not make the same mistakes with diverse outputs as we've made with traditional outputs? I don't want to see that impact metric, that referableness creeping into our career pathways for DRTPs, because that's not what they're about. And it's not what our career path should be about. So a lot of what we're kind of putting in there is like, actually, no, we really want to encourage all the good science stuff. I'm going to rerun the training on narrative CVs and FAIR. We don't do assessments anyway as a society. But, you know, we encourage people away from that. But really, it's protecting kind of what we built as those career pathways, which are about people and not about a specific metricized output. And I'm really hoping, I put a meeting in the diary for the 20th of October, and I really want to get this action plan finished because it's driving me a bit nuts now. And I really hope it's going to be on Zenodo soon, and it will be done. And yeah, that's all I've got. Oh, yeah, and I forgot to say, I'm on the board of the Carpentries. We very publicly pulled out of an NSF grant because they wouldn't let us do EDIA, so I'm not even attempting to go to the States anytime soon.
Thank you so much, Mayon. Yes. Thank you to our panelists for wonderful provocations and for keeping massively within time. I mean, that's unheard of when you get four at the same time, so thank you. So we've heard about shifting sands, working to do good things in spite of the REF, trying to navigate the REF, and how societies intersect with coalitions. And your questions have been coming into the Slido. Please keep putting them in, or maybe just upvote the ones you really, really, really want to hear the panelists talk about. But I want to start before that by repeating a question that Samantha had to the rest of the panelists in a way, which is, how do we avoid making the same mistakes with non-traditional outputs that we did with traditional outputs? Is anyone willing to offer some thoughts on that? You'll have to press, yeah.
What happens if I say you're not going to avoid it? That you're going to end up making the same mistakes because initially people have certain ideas in mind and you have to unsocialize them to thinking that way. We're facing this in the current context with things like narrative CVs. I was having this conversation at lunch with some folks, like, nobody's teaching me how to read a narrative CV. You know, we're requiring them for certain kinds of roles and certain kinds of grant proposals and so forth. But at the end of the day, I don't know how to read them. It looks like a cover letter to me, and I end up like Google scholaring their publications really are. And I know I'm not alone. So you can do all the training you want to, but I have a feeling it's going to take a lot of work to undo what is a very entrenched system.
Yeah, I agree. We're highly likely to make similar mistakes because as human beings, we're inherently seeking to do better. And in order to do better, you have to have some criterion of doing better. You know, if you're running, you've got to run in less time. Is that a thing? Yeah. So you have a metric. The important thing is to know the metric, and that the metric is reasonable and doesn't impinge on the values you have. Because so many of the metrics we have now are systematically biased against certain people, certain groups, certain characteristics. So we need to surface those and make sure that they're not. I think we will have competition. There will always be a set of rules. We just need to make sure the rules align with our values. And they expect them to change, because change is good. That's how we progress.
I think once you can measure something, it can become a target, and that's what you've got to be careful about. It shouldn't be the sole target. I mean, obviously, we know about responsible metrics. Don't just pick one metric. Use it as an indicator, have some qualitative information or some contextual information. So we're at least starting from a responsible viewpoint, I would hope, in terms of, you know, starting to embed these more. Okay, again, from a very sort of University of Edinburgh perspective, my code of practice says academics, their individual performance cannot be used like positively or negatively in terms of REF submission. Like institutional assessment and individual performance are different things. So they shouldn't cross in that way, but it also does mean that an academic wouldn't be able to go, but look how many referable outputs I've got. I've got all of these. It doesn't work both ways. That's where we're at. It's got to be a more productive conversation.
Thank you. And thank you, Samantha, for The question. Have I turned myself back on? Yes. Right. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, so I think my point with that is that in many other institutions, the career pathways are still very young and developing. So I see it as that bit of this coming now, as those are being developed, is kind of where I was a little bit worried. Because it's still very young in its developingness.
So this is the point I'd like to reassure the panel, that they don't have to answer every question if they don't want to. They have a lot of questions, and we'll try and get through plenty of them. The first one is, they're all anonymous. The first one asks, well, it notes the speakers on the panel are from very research-intensive institutions. I'm on. I'll go up. The speakers on the panel from very research-intensive institutions, what responsibility do you think such HEIs, and indeed maybe the HiddenREF, have to include less research-intensive institutions in research culture, conversations, and networks?
I'll take that with my society hat on, in that actually it covers all kinds of institutions. And they are all in the mix, and the consultation, what we do is with all of them. So certainly from that core, our action plan stance, and that work with that leaders network, it is a broad range of institutions, and we try to bring that voice in. So certainly I kind of hope that helps. And in some of the work that I'm doing, like the Step Up project, that also includes some institutions that aren't research intensive in that mix as well. So there are kind of cross-cutting projects working on some of this stuff.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it? One of the things is, I guess I can say this as a research intensive. I mean, they're protectionist. We've got a lot invested in research income, etc., and what that means in terms of reputation and so on. So the question really is not how do we include less intensive institutions, but how do we all get together to learn from each other? Because I suspect, I mean, I have no evidence for this, but I suspect the research cultures in intensive universities are probably more problematic and in less intensive settings. So I think we have a lot we can learn from them. And not, I mean, it comes back to my point that they should be recognised for what they do, not for trying to be like us.
I suppose, yes, in theory, we are quite a privileged position that if we can judge all outputs equitably, then they will get resource in our university that they wouldn't necessarily get in other universities. But having conversations like this mean that it will hopefully be more on the radar of the less research-intensive universities, that these are output types that are valued in the sector. And then, so yeah, we're just part of a conversation. That's part of our responsibility to help increase that, I think.
I think that's the point to move on to the next question. So, Kopana made a point about changing roles. So one of our questioners asks, what changes do the panel think are on the horizon, maybe both best and worst case scenarios? And someone added to that a little reply saying what roles might be at risk, what roles might come into being that don't exist or are currently rare within our research ecosystems.
I think we're going to see an increase in the importance of data stewardship and data management, and possibly also what I believe here is called trusted research. We call it research securitization, export controls, dual use. I think there's going to have to be, it's going to be all over there's going to be an increase in attending to that kind of, those kinds of, what I think are actually sort of anathema to open science, open research. But that's one area where I think we're going to see an increase in importance and changes in the roles around data management, for example.
Yeah, and some of that can still be fair and still attributed on the way. I think for me, Gen AI plays a big thing. I'm involved in a carpentries lesson looking at how we teach this and to who and at what point and how that plays out. I mean, do we start to lose the junior researcher roles, those early research associate roles? Do we start to lose the junior RSC role because of that potentially? There's an awful lot of buzz about applied coding and what that all means and where that plays in. And almost do we then have actually a whole bunch of extra roles because people are completely short-circuiting the research process with these tools, that then we have to check that actually is their work a lot more and we can't quite take it on trust in the same way because that is worry. And at the same time, the financial model for all these tools is a bit of a house of cards. So at what point actually does that reliance then fall down? And then we have to pick up the pieces. I think it's going to be a very interesting landscape over the next 5 years in that respect.
That's a really useful bridge, I think, to what Tim said about change, in the sense that, you know, we're not, I've got this one, we're not aiming towards a system whereby we change research culture so that we stabilize it again. We're ultimately going to have to accept this constant change that's going on, and we're not just aiming at moving targets, but it's going to be a changing research sector, and we can't yet guarantee that many of the roles which have wonderfully been created are being, you know, recognized in ways they weren't before are still going to exist because of external factors.
I was going to say that there's two things there. I think what will we see? I think what we'll see is an increase in governance. We see more of that. And I think the challenge which I'm currently struggling with or persisting with is proportionate governance. So actually it not becoming a barrier to conducting research, but actually something that makes research better. And one of the things I often get accused of is like the medicalization of non-medical research or shape research. I think that's something really to be avoided. It's got to be proportionate. What would I like to see? What I'd like to see is an acknowledgement of the costs and challenge of being open. And things like producing fair data are a hugely specialist skill. And I can say this because I'm a PI, and apologies to all you PIs watching or in the audience. We can be so arrogant, can't we? We think we're like the leaders of the team, and we think we have expertise in everything, and if we can't do something, it must be unimportant. So I think we need to change some of that and recognise how difficult it is to do these difficult and challenging and costly, and that should be, look at my 4-level model, it should be in grant funding, should be recognised that costs. Those posts should be recognised as posts that you can charge for in grant funding, and so on. And those kinds of building the infrastructure and recognising the importance of those and being able to cost them and recognise them. That's what I'd really like to see development in.
In terms of what's on the horizon, what roles might change and grow, I think technical and technician roles, a change is going to come in the next few years. So I have to care about this, but there's changes to HISA staff return, and some of them have started because of REF, and some of them are coming in a few years' time. But there's going to be more reporting of technician roles. But for that, we need a definition of technicians. So there's going to be an awful lot of discussion. And again, as soon as you start measuring something, someone's going to start critiquing it. So I don't know what the change will be, but I think a change is coming.
One of the things that I know I'm least observing in Ireland is we are producing more PhDs than there are traditional pathways for them. And we're also finding in roles like data stewardship, there's not well-defined pathways for progression. And I think several people kind of talked about how that is a something that I think will, those hidden roles, that's part of the reason why they're hidden, because they don't fit. I'm looking at the Netherlands with some degree of hope, because they are increasingly recognizing in their research governance systems that non-traditional careers that people can, say, move into a research role, then into a research support role, and even as a research supporter, be doing something that is research active. So I'm kind of hopeful that maybe they'll be able to do this. One role that I think may become more important, or at least maybe I'm being hopeful, is that science and technology communication. And I'm taking broadly writ. And I can't stand that model of the scientists know more and we just have to convince people to accept what they do. But science and technology, illiteracy, miscommunication, disinformation, these things are very real. And I hope we're going to see more roles dedicated to thinking broadly about how to combat things. But maybe that's a pipe dream.
So almost as though you could anticipate what the next question is on the list. Some of what you talked about drifted towards technicians, data stewards in that area. One of the questions we have here is whether you think the sector is ready for a nationally accepted career pathway for things like research technical professionals, and maybe some insights on what you think we would need to put something like that into place. Are we ready?
Yes.
Technicians concordat already exists. There is work happening, just not fast enough. But also, yeah, who counts as a technician? Because in my institution, our team of digital research technical professionals are not in that technicians list. But in other institutions, they may be. So, but then we have our own career pathways, and we're very lucky that we have the data steward pathway. And we are working on a more central one with some colleagues from King's.
That was easy.
It's coming. Be patient, but it's coming.
I think the thing I'd say on that one is that I observe that things like technician commitment are great. And maybe their implementation gets looped in and kind of rolled in with lots of other things universities feel like they may be expected to commit to in some form. And whether it's sitting at the top of the list may not quite be the case. And I think that we've seen some of the colleagues who've been here the last couple of days are based in libraries, for example, and one of our supporters is Research Libraries UK, and we know the difficulty library profession have had within UK higher education to try and advocate for quite a long time now to just do simple things like change job roles so that people can get recognised and rewarded in the right way. And my fear is that it gets stuck in that same job role problem, but there are some really good examples out there which hopefully some institutions can draw on and be inspired by.
I mean, I've literally just changed departments and had to change my job role so I'm eligible for promotion. So it's not just the technicians, it's an awful lot of PS roles are kind of stuck on that one grade and you have to argue for your role to be regraded. It is slowly changing. Yeah, the whole professional service stuff isn't in the HESA data set. I've seen some analysis work with a different hat on, and I'm like, where's the numbers for these stuff? And they're like, well, we don't collect them because HESA don't want them. And I'm like, well, if I'm doing some kind of analysis on EDIA and I want to know the proportion of staff, that doesn't help me. But yeah.
Yeah, I think these commitments, policies, etc., they're kind of necessary, but by no means sufficient. There's this huge implementation gap, and that's the skill of culture, I think, working out how to do that.
We'll move on then. So the next highest voted question is quite a short one, but I'm going to add one from further down. The question is, who on the panel have committed to the 5% manifesto? And what do they think, and what do they think they will actually manage? So in terms of like, have your institutions committed, are you aware, and what do you think they'll actually get, as in, will they hit 5%? But there's a slightly longer question below if you'd rather skirt that one, if I can find it, because there's now a whole bunch appeared, around the barriers to submitting NTOs and maybe hitting something like 5% of all outputs institution being non-traditional, saying that it's not necessarily assessment, it's in the labour and the cost of creating versions of record for assessment and the supporting materials to go with them. submitting journal articles is just easier. What can be done to address this issue? So it's something really about how do we kind of claw back that kind of 98 point whatever % of publications? How do we change the curve in that hidden ref graph? What mechanisms need to put into place? And do you think we're going to make the targets?
I'm going to get myself kicked out, but I am not committing us to 5%, because if I do, the burden will be on our arts and humanities and social scientists producing those, more naturally producing those non-traditional output types. And that's not a fair thing for me to do, to just say, as an institution, we will do this, because the burden will go to certain people. So, sorry.
I will say in the team I'm in, pretty much every single output will be non-traditional, because that's the team that we are. But I mean, referencing that, I mean, there's this talk about, do you make it, a software or a data paper, or is it the software or the data? And then, how are we metricalizing that? I mean, it's not going to be the GitHub hits. It's probably going to have a DOI, or it's going to have to be on PyPy or something. And then we understand it. It's whether the people collating it for us in our institution understand it and understand what it means. And I think there's a piece there that when you're in that culture of producing those outputs, they are normal to you and you understand what they are and you understand what things represent. I think there's then a piece where we're then working with a central team that may not. And that's going to be our big piece of work next, I think. And I have no idea whether we've gone for the 5% or not. Above my pay grade, I think.
I think one of the, again, from outside of this conversation, you all keep this rough stuff on this side of the pond, okay? Just, yeah. Well, you don't because you've got Northern Ireland. But I think one of the challenges seems to be, at least from some of the conversations I've had, is the infrastructures for supporting the deposit, curation, dissemination of these non-traditional outputs. So, as you say, it's easy. We know how to do this with publications of all sorts. We have, and data sets and software. There's even that area of non-traditional output we know how to make available. I think there's all kinds of things, artworks, musical performances. We're still a little bit, a lot behind the curve on how to, data standards, connecting up perhaps via, indicator, like identifiers to traditional outputs, persistent identifiers. Some outputs that maybe in fact are meant to be ephemeral. So how do we deal with those? So I think there's still an infrastructure question that needs to be addressed before I think you can really make those commitments.
Presumably an infrastructure that's not just technical, but is also social and socialized. Okay. Let's move on to another question. Tim, towards the end, you mentioned PCE. I wonder if the panel will be interested in talking about their thoughts on measuring people, cultures, environment, and what effect you think that might have on research culture. Are we going to get perverse things on research culture by trying to measure that? Or not?
Try and stop me. Culture, measuring culture, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, one of the things we all agree on is what we do not want, although some people I have spoken to do. People working in culture don't want is my culture is better than your culture. And we definitely don't want rankings, top culture. Someone said that to me and I said, yeah, it's like middle class culture, that's the best, isn't it? It's a proper one. And they went, that's ridiculous, Tim. Anyway, I forgot where I was going with this. So for me, when we devolved the funding we got from Research England, down to our faculties, which is sort of our organisational unit, we asked them to say, find out what your priorities are, identify the way to address your priorities, tell us where you've moved and what you see is next. And that, channeling my inner everyone who's ever been on reality TV, that journey, that's your culture. It's what am I trying to change? how am I going to do it, and how do I know I've got there? And as many people, someone spoke earlier, what did you learn about what didn't go expected, didn't go the way you planned? And sharing that and being open and honest and transparent. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing an awful lot of research culture work. I'm part of the broader pool of people and not directly in the direct steering group, which is also interesting because I'm one of those fringe people that probably should be pulled more in, that, you know, does do research but isn't a researcher and kind of falls through our institutional cracks. You know, I put things to our Central Ethics Board and they look at me and go, but you're on a PS contract. And then I explain what I'm doing and they go, oh, no, it is proper research then. I went, well, yeah, that's why I've come to you. So I think there is a piece there of recognizing everyone across the institution that is doing things that maybe we still don't and having the support in place for them. Because I sit on our researcher and doctoral development training board and I've had debates around, shouldn't this training be available to everyone doing research? And they go, well, surely you're doing a PhD or something. I'm like, no, I'm just a regular Joe Blogs PS person that is also actually doing publishable research. And that maybe isn't as recognised as maybe it should be, and support isn't their personal bugbear. And I think seeing more of that would be good, because we know it happens. It just maybe doesn't get the support. Or maybe I've just been really unlucky. I don't know.
Okay, I have two remarks. I'm going to respond to Tim first. Okay, we don't get Research England culture money, but we do care about research culture and we do invest in it. We have got an action plan. We have decided what our priorities are, what our values are, what we're driving towards. So some of our problem would be, yes, if REF went, you've got the wrong values, and then try to enforce different ones, that would be an issue. But the actual fundamental question about measuring the quality of a culture. So yesterday, for those of you that weren't here, we listened to a song from K-pop Demon Hunters. And so people were very judgmental that I'd seen the film, I knew the song. I'm also a big Manchester City fan. Does that mean my culture is lower quality than some of the people in the room? You can't measure the quality of a culture. I don't think it exists like that. So.
But PCE is going to make us measure our people, culture and environment, and I think it's likely that they will do the inevitable, which is focus on what can be measured. And so our job is to make that process optimal. It won't be perfect, but as good as it can be.
We're very new to the research culture world, and I think we have a Welcome-funded project, and somebody mentioned it to me. And so, yeah, we don't have the same kinds of things, and it does seem like what we've essentially taken from the research culture conversations that, let's face it, were happening here first and codified, is we've taken only those things that can be measured. We've taken on things like, well, how many people are undergoing training on responsible research and innovation? Have we rolled out some kind of asynchronous training program? Are all of the PhD students, before they get to X point in their trajectory, taking the right thing? I mean, those are all things we can count. You know, we have an uptick of X number of percentage of students and PIs who are doing their PI training. That's all countable. Are we looking at other things like are students dealing with their data responsibly? The answer is a resounding no. Do we have GDPR compliance for human subjects research? Barely. I mean, it's like, okay, so those are kinds of things we're talking about. But also things like, are we including people in our research? Like, is it research culture like an undergraduate? How many units are actually having undergraduates in their research teams? Are we seeing a more inclusive approach to being able to include new kinds of populations and people in our research subject? I mean, it's like there's all these other things that we aren't talking about that to me are part of the research culture. Do we have a regular research culture series? Can people bring in a particular unit in my department or my school? Do we have a way to do a reading group? Do we have a way to do unpublished works in progress. To me, that's much more interesting, and that's not countable. So it's not going to be counted as part of the research culture. And I feel like we've borrowed that essentially somewhat whole cloth from the UK, sadly. We're still really hung up on you guys.
I now have a flashing battery pack. Right. So I think we're drawing towards the end, and let's ask a slightly lighter question, or maybe be incredibly contentious. Who knows? So, what should we call NTOs? Can we agree on a title? Charlotte had DRO, or DRO. Yeah. Natalie had DOT. What are we going to do about this? What does your instinct say?
When I heard dot yesterday, I really like that. I think I'm probably stealing it with credit.
Can't we just call them what they are? Do they need to be in a bucket that's othered in some way? Do we just say, put it in what it is? Does it even need a list? Do we not just decide for ourselves what is the research output? That would be the better option, surely.
As someone said in another question, does it matter that we each call outputs that aren't usually submitted to the ref such a wide variety of different names? Are we at risk of losing focus because we can't agree on a name? I'm guessing you're saying no. I'm imagining like writing a report after this festival that says, it's got like ./NTO.
I think, so when I was setting up my working group, someone was retiring, so I was trying to pick his brains before he left and all of that, and he was like, we have been having this conversation for decades. Please stop othering them, just treat them as outputs. And that was his like final word on the meeting, and then he left. So it was very dramatic. That's what I've got.
I mean, do we just go between ISBN and DOIs? Is that, a split?
I don't know, but I'm very philosophically against naming something by what they're not. So we could go for more interesting outputs.
Or how about the stuff that actually does the KEF bit as well? Knowledge exchange framework. So most of the really interesting stuff is the knowledge exchange framework stuff. So all that collaborative people science, all those exhibitions, all of those things fall into that knowledge exchange framework stuff. A lot of it. So, yeah.
Joking aside, I think I agree that you ultimately want to just have outputs, but at the moment, because they are not being recognised, and it's not the output that's doing that, it's a group of people, or group of us, you need to have them identifiable as distinct and valuable to be able to create the change, and then you can change just outputs, I think.
I'm just going to do the Scottish cliche again. We don't have KEF. We're just slightly different and special in our own little way.
Strategic temporary utility. I'm not calling it that as an acronym, I'm just saying that's what you seem to be suggesting of NTOs, or something, or dots, or whatever.
Or just the cool stuff.
Okay, from now on, HiddenREF just calls it the cool stuff. Maybe not. So, I'm going to suggest we draw this to a close, partly because our speakers all ended early, and so they've ended up speaking for longer in the kind of the panel session. So can we thank our panelists for their rigor, significance, etc. And we can let you retire to a seat somewhere as we close the festival. Thank you. So yes, I moved that. Thank you so much to Kopana, Tim, Charlotte and Samantha for a wonderful panel to close the festival. We're done. And I've really enjoyed the last 2 days, genuinely. I was feeling very unwell on Saturday, as some of you know, and sort of managed to recover miraculously. I think that's probably in part because I really wanted to be here, and I can genuinely say that I'm not just saying that whilst feeling incredibly ill and making you all sick on this week. Before I hand over to Simon for some inspiring words, because Simon tends to be the one who does that in our group, I just want to offer a few final thoughts. And you've seen some of these already, but I think they're worth reiterating. Firstly, before we get to that, please provide feedback on the event. You will receive an email about this as well. But if you haven't already, scan the QR code and provide feedback at some point in the future when the internet's working a bit better. So, we need to thank, for the final time today, our festival partners, Society of Research Software Engineering, Coherent Digital, and Emerald Publishing, as well as our media partner, Research Professional News. And also, like yesterday, could you please give a big hand to all the staff at the think tank, all the venue staff, caterers, servers, particularly today, AV technicians, everyone who's been involved in this. Thank you so much. And today I'm also going to embarrass Pete once again as our photographer. I'm going to call him meticulous today. That's how I describe his work as a photographer. Thanks, Pete. We have to also thank our supporters, many of whom have sent representatives here today, some of whom we've heard speak in different forms. They really kind of give us that leverage, those networks, that kind of bottom-up knowledge that we really need to drive forward the HiddenREF. So thank you to all of them for their support, those who joined relatively recently or those who've been with us right from the beginning. And for the last time, the 3 things to look out for from HiddenREF when you're kind of like missing the HiddenREF next week. The first one is to keep going, oh, I know there's an evidence review coming. Let's look out for that and occasionally refresh your LinkedIn. Eventually that'll appear. You can also refresh your YouTube or your podcast feed to get our podcast where we attempt to demystify the ref. And people have already, over the last couple of days, come up to us and said, enjoy workshops. They sound fun. Could we do that in this context? So please do get in touch. We can't guarantee we can like run one really soon. But we might be able to put people together in regions. We might be able to work between different professional societies and networks to put on workshops that both enable us to develop and improve these workshops, but also give those skills back to communities so they can start doing that work themselves as well. And of course, we learn from you every time we do this, as we did at the festival. And finally, the competition's coming back, as we flagged earlier. We're going to launch the competition in March 2026, our 3rd HiddenREF competition, with a submission deadline in September, an awards ceremony in November next year. We don't have any more details on that yet. Once again, we'll be going out to the community to ask them the sorts of things they think should be recognised, the things that there's been some things come up the last couple of days that might end up as new categories. But we've seen today the amazing impact the competition has had on some people's careers and on different communities in and outside the UK. So we really look forward to reading or looking at, or whatever form of interaction we need to have, those things that are entered into the competition next year. And of course, depending on the outcome of the ref pause, and I think that's the first ref pause klaxon of the festival, at least from the podium, the competition might be rather different in its scope, scale, and relationship to our national research assessment exercise. So we will be watching that to think about how we craft this. Which takes us back to the beginning, why we all do this, and at which point I'll hand over to Simon for some inspiring-y final words before we all go home. I'm really building this up, aren't I? Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, James. That's, I think the most inspirational thing you can say after 2 very long days is, let's go home. That's probably the thing that would get the widest applause. So I only need a couple of minutes. I just want to sort of take a look at some of the things we've done. And I want to do one very important thing as well, which is 2 people who are absolutely vital to the last couple of days have not yet been thanked. And they are, and I think, no, they're still not at the back. Oh, they are. So Lindsay at the back, Lindsay Ballantyne, who is... There would be no conference at all without Lindsay, who has just run things amazingly and done this right on the back of after running an international conference, 2-3 weeks ago. So incredible work from Lindsay. And of course, James, who's... Now, I've been in this situation before, and this is usually where we come out with like big bundles of flowers and things, right? But have you ever, as I say, I've been in that situation. They're really hard to get home on the train. So what we did instead is we've sent you a little something each back to your houses. So it's already there waiting for you rather than having to carry it home on the train. So thank you once again. It was an absolutely wonderful event. So I just wanted to say just a couple of words. So basically, you know, when I first got into this field, kind of looking at research assessment, the way the REF was conducted, and the way that we could do things to improve them, that sort of, you know, that very tired simile of it being like an onion kept coming back to me. But what I hadn't quite understood was that this was an infinite onion problem, and that we'd just keep peeling back layers and to find more and more and more. And it's so complex that I think that becomes quite overwhelming, and that's really why there hasn't been much movement in this field, because it's difficult to know what to do. And for inspiration to that, I definitely want to turn to Natalie's wonderful presentation yesterday. So not only did she tell us about NTO workshops in Liverpool and how things were changing, she also gave us the new informal strapline for the HiddenREF, which is pull your socks up and get on with it. Right? So I think that is absolutely the approach that we have taken. We've just said, well, what can we change? We'll work on that. We'll try and improve it over time. So you'll have seen the things that we're doing. So we're raising awareness by running events like this and by doing all of the media and comms that we do. We are looking to fill the gaps in knowledge, and you took part in that yesterday and today. Yesterday, we conducted, I calculated about a year's worth of research study in just over 2 hours, which is just like research productivity off the scale. And then today we kick-started our expert groups, who can take the guidance that we're putting together, refine it, and apply it. We are then ensuring those skills and expertise get into universities and other areas of our community by running things like NTO workshops. And it's been brilliant to be here for the last couple of days and have, well, I think we're up to 3 or 4 new universities are now scheduled, which will all be happening in the new year because our calendar is already full. If we can continue to run these workshops, and the idea is that we hand over the running to the universities themselves, we can entirely scale up this exercise, and we'll keep the skills going in the universities, and we can grow them even with our relatively small team. Then we're keeping up the pressure. So guidance comes out. Sometimes there's a bit of wiggle room, and the sector tries to move around it. And one of our roles, I think, is very much to make sure that the guidance is followed in the way that the REF intended. And we've already had some success in this area, and we'll keep up that pressure, and we could really do with all the help from our community in doing that. And if we can do that, if we can raise the awareness of the importance of NTOs and the changes that need to happen to research assessment, if we can ensure that we're getting the right information and guidance, putting that together, we're embedding those skills into universities, then we'll start to see the research culture change that we want. And if you want to think about what is possible, I think today has just been an incredible example of that. So, we've just had the panel who went through all of the many different problems that lie ahead of us and the solutions as well, and some of the issues that we are dealing with. This morning we saw the lightning talks with a huge breadth of different work being talked about, different roles, different solutions, and some different problems as well that we'll have to deal with. And then this afternoon we had the feedback from the HiddenREF winners, and which was just absolutely incredible for me. I think if you want to see what can happen when you just try to nudge the envelope in the right direction, then the talks this afternoon were absolutely the perfect example of this. I have to say that I was very, very glad to be sitting over there in the corner where the lights were darkened whilst we were hearing about that, and I did not envy Lindsay having to talk about it afterwards. So we now come to the situation where we've got to get on with the next stage. We've seen the HiddenREF competition. That'll be taking place next year. And I think, to finish on the quote that we started with, James earlier on was saying maybe it sounds a bit like a platitude to say if we don't recognise the people who are vital to research, we limit our ability to conduct research. So maybe it's time to change that into if we recognise everyone who is vital to the conduct of research, then we'll advance our ability to conduct research. And to do that, we need all of your help. So I just want to say a final thank you to everybody for coming today and helping us in this journey. Thank you. And I think that's it. I wasn't entirely sure for any announcements. Thank you very much. Safe journeys home.